Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 116. We are back, and it is the 1st of March. Dennis Crowder here with Kasper Ozolowski on a fun fight week leading into UFC 209, an event we've been looking forward to a lot. And with that, we've got a really, really fun show for you guys.
Oh, super fun. Fun is the theme of the show, and obviously UFC 209 is the theme of the show. We figured, you know what, we'll take a slight break from the usual way we do our shows. We get a bunch of fighters, a bunch of guests on. We still have guests, but we thought, you know what, you guys love these breakdowns, these previews. Our last end of year episode did really well with a bunch of journalists and MMA personalities. So we thought, let's do exactly that. Let's do exactly what the people have been asking for. So on this program, we've got the one and only John Morgan of MMA Junkie. He's there in Vegas right now. We were going to be talking to him about a whole bunch of things that are happening in the world of MMA. And of course, UFC 209, Robin Black. Everybody knows Robin Black. He's going to be jumping back on the program to preview the main fights from UFC 209 and get you excited. Karim Zidan, who everybody always asks for us to get back on the program, is coming on the show. As you know, he is the expert on all things as far as MMA in Russia and the Eastern Bloc of Europe. So we thought, you know what? Khabib Nurmagomedov has been a huge part of this lead up to UFC 209, and Karim's going to share a lot of insight on Khabib Nurmagomedov, the rumors of him potentially retiring in the future, his insight and influence in Russia in general, and a whole bunch of other things. And then John Kavanagh will be joining us on the show as well, won't he, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. If you guys missed it, John Kavanagh is coming down to Australia. It's going to be a fun evening where me and Kasper are going to interview him on April 7th in Sydney at the Star Event Centre, April 18th in Melbourne at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. We're going to be interviewing him live, and then you guys will get an opportunity to do a Q&A. So, hey, before John comes down under, we're going to have a bit of a chat to him about the event. Also, it doesn't hurt the fact that there's a lot to talk to him about in terms of Conor McGregor and Khabib and everything that's going on, Floyd Mayweather. So it's going to be a fun chat with him. We can't wait to speak to him again. It's been a long time since he's been on the program, so it's great to have him back on the show. And also, I mean, Cass, we mentioned in the last episode we'll be giving away a double pass to the show. We will be announcing the winner in just a second when I cut back to you. But before I do, just want to quickly remind everybody to jump on Twitter and follow us at SubmissionAUS, and also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadio. AUS. It's going to be a lot of fun with the UFC 209 pay-per-view coming up this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the competition. The competition is still running. We are not just giving away a free double pass, we're giving away double passes every single week until the event. And it's really simple, and the man who won the first double pass did exactly this. All you got to do is jump on iTunes, leave a review for Submission Radio. The link is in the description below, and email us at info@submissionradio.com. The reason why you got to email us is just so you can confirm your username and say, hey, I did this review, and also so you can tell us whether you want to go to Melbourne or Sydney. Where do you want to see John Kavanagh, Melbourne or Sydney? So it's as easy as that. We've been getting a lot of great reviews, but it seems like some people have been emailing. So if you did leave a review recently and it was to enter this competition, make sure to email us info@submissionradio.com and just let us know which one you want to attend, Melbourne or Sydney. And we'll be reading the reviews. We'll choose the best ones, and we'll send you on your merry way to see John Kavanagh, and doesn't hurt that you can meet us as well. Now, the man who won the first free double pass to see John Kavanagh is a man by the name of Mark Fellows, a long-time listener, and he wrote us an incredibly sexy review that I'm going to read right now. He says, his words, not ours, Submission Radio, hosted by the jovial and sexy Dennis and Kasper, it's like he's known us all our lives, brings MMA fans closer to the action each week with their witty, knowledgeable, and incisive interviews with the who's who of the MMA industry/universe. Not simply content with scratching the surface with generic questions, the diligent duo dig deeper with every guest, striving to uncover a treasure trove of interesting info and exclusive revelations for their dedicated listeners who dutifully await each week's episode like a loyal dog waiting for its master to return home from work. Without a punctual weekly dose of SR, it's quite possible fans of this podcast would shrivel up and cease to exist. An entertaining podcast with healing properties. What more could one ask for? It must be the greatest. Mark Fellows. It was an easy choice there. Obviously, Mark Fellows gets the double pass. We have never looked at any of our listeners as loyal dogs. They're MMA fans, and as are we. But when we read these reviews, it is incredibly humbling, because I remember when we first started, the reviews were simply great podcast, enjoy, and that's all that is necessary. But when you see you guys going in this effort, it's a heartwarming experience. So we thank you, Mark, for your review. We thank all you guys for reviews, and we'll definitely see you, Mark, in April.
That's right, guys. So we're giving away double passes. Make sure to jump on, give us a review, send us an email, Melbourne or Sydney, give us your preference, and we'll provide the double passes for you guys to come down and check out the show. But speaking of shows, Cass, it's a big, hot show. Before we kick this thing off, just a quick reminder to everybody. I mean, there's some fun content on the YouTube page, some interviews with Tony Ferguson, a conference call, things people can check out before UFC 209.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things. There's, of course, the technique of the week, which we'll be coming back with very, very shortly. But if you haven't checked it out, if you aren't aware, there are a whole bunch and stacks of techniques that are just, I mean, it's essentially gold mine on the channel. We've got some UFC fighters that are going to be doing techniques of the week for us in the future. So stay tuned to that. But without further ado, enough rambling. It is time for our first guest, and Dennis, I believe, is on the line.
All right, guys, our next guest can be seen at Octagon's side of almost every UFC card you've ever watched in his patented blue polo. He is the familiar voice you hear at every post-fight press conference. Him and his partner in crime, Cold Coffee, also can be heard on the awesome podcast, MMA Roadshow. The man behind one of the best MMA websites, MMA Junkie, is in the house. John Morgan, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Hey, thank you, fellas. I appreciate it, man. That's a mighty fine intro, sir. You got me excited to hear me.
Yeah, we do all right. But no, in all honesty, it's a huge honor to have you back on the program. And first off, congratulations is in order, because the MMA Roadshow had its 100th episode. Tell us, how did you guys celebrate? What's it like looking back on 100 episodes of awesomeness that you and Ken were able to create?
Well, it's 100 episodes of something. I don't know if awesomeness counts, but no, it was fun for us, man. Yeah, we obviously celebrated with a few frosty beverages and told some stories and had a good time. But it's been a fun project. It's something we do for fun more than anything else, man. It's not, we don't even sell advertising for it or anything like that. It's just enjoy talking MMA, man. And I don't get a chance to go in with the MMA Junkie radio crew as much as I'd like, because I'm on the road so much. And man, it just kind of gives us an opportunity to sit down and shoot the shit a little bit. You know what I mean? It's kind of what we would be doing anyway. You know what I mean? If we were recording it or not, we would be having a couple frosty beverages and talking some MMA. So I thought, hey, why not go ahead and make a little show out of this? So it's been fun, man. We never really knew exactly where we were going with it. We don't have a long-term business plan or anything like that. But it's been fun to do, and pretty cool to reach a milestone like that.
Yeah, well, for fans who haven't listened to the show, it's sort of a mix of highlights from Fight Week and a podcast. It's usually recorded over, like you mentioned, a few beers in a bar with fans sitting around and hanging out. It's got a real cool vibe about it, something that me and Casper got to experience and really, really enjoyed. Now that's up to episode 100, tell us, what's sort of been your favorite place or episode that you've been able to record the show? What are sort of the top three in your mind?
Oh man, that's great. One of the first ones we did where we had no guests was down in New Orleans. Was a fun one. I don't really remember the end of it, to be honest with you, but there weren't any guest fighters in town, and so we decided to bar hop a little bit, and basically we went from like bar to bar and would record like an episode in each bar as we wandered down Bourbon Street. And at one point we were actually on the balcony of a strip club. Wow. Throwing beads down on Bourbon Street and recording part of the podcast, and a fight broke out underneath us. I mean, that was pretty nuts. And then I'd have to say Glasgow as well was awesome as well, man. Glasgow, we basically we went out and met some people at a bar, and some locals there. This awesome bar, obviously drinking some scotch or some whiskey, if you'll say it the right way while you're there. But and then suddenly realized, dude, we still have to do a podcast. I was like, so, hey, do you guys just want to all come back to our Airbnb that we had rented? So we just, a bunch of people we had just met, they came back to our place, and it was. Now I will say neither one of those are our finest episodes in terms of journalistic content. But as far as just kind of partying a little bit. those are either our best or worst episodes, depending on how you like it.
Yeah, I think the journalistic content kind of goes out the window when you're in a strip club, and people are very forgiving. And it's one of those things where you would just wish you had video for something like that, because I mean that sounds amazing. And I've always loved that story about, I think there was one event where you were talking about Derek Lewis, and then before you know it, he was like behind you guys in a bar, and then he's on the show, and then he's saying some crazy things. I think that's got to crack the top 3 somewhere in there.
Definitely post-fight show in Zagreb, Croatia, man. We were just kind of sitting down in the lobby, knocking out the post-fight show at like 4:00 in the morning, and then Derek Lewis sneaks up behind us and it's kind of messing me a little bit, and we just, hey man, do you want to sit down and talk? And man, he was telling us how he hated Croatia and the food was awful, and he just said, just being Derek Lewis, man, having fun like he is. And Cole Copy asked him if what the first thing he was going to eat was when he got back home. And he said it kind of under his breath. I didn't even hear it until we went back and edited it. He basically just said, vagina. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe he just said that. But that's Derek Lewis, man. He's the best.
Oh, man, so many classic episodes, guys. Make sure to check out the program. All right, John, there's a lot to talk about in the world of MMA. I mean, it's heating up right now. People are, again, excited about everything that's happening. And one of the reasons for that is the return of GSP to the UFC. Now that his return is official, John, tell us, what do you think makes sense for him as his first opponent back in the UFC?
I'm kind of leaning towards the Michael Bisping title fight at middleweight, to be honest with you. There's a lot of options on the table, no doubt about it. The 170-pound division, there's so many good contenders right now, and it's such an interesting division. I don't know if you guys just saw it. We just announced, actually, Demian Maia and George Masvidal are actually going to meet at UFC 211 in Dallas. Of course, we've got the title fight this weekend as well. I think a lot of stuff's exciting at welterweight, and I'd hate to put a pause on that. And the other thing, too, is that, I'd like George St. Pierre to have a chance to make some history, you know what I mean, and just be the 4th guy to win a title in 2 weight classes. And I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense for Michael Bisping, too. I mean, here's a guy whose career is coming to an end. He's admitted it. He said, listen, the next time I lose, that's probably it for me. He's been a company guy his whole life. And it said straight up, I want to cash in on the biggest fights I can right now because I don't have much longer to do this. And take nothing away from Yoel Romero. He is definitely the number 1 contender at 185 pounds, but that fight's not going to sell a whole lot, I don't think. Yoel's not moving the needle, so to speak. But GSP, Michael Bisping, I think that would move the needle quite a bit. So to me, I honestly feel like that's the fight that makes the most sense to anybody not named Yoel Romero.
It's an interesting thing that you bring that up because it sort of divided the MMA community. A lot of skeptics about the fight, critics of it. Some people don't like the idea of GSP sort of jumping up to middleweight because, I mean, there's a couple of reasons there. One is a lot of people feel like the middleweight division's a little bit backed up. A lot of people in that division sort of trying to get to that title shot and things have been delayed for a while. Another reason is people don't really know how GSP would do at middleweight if he does beat Bisping and become champion, then have to fight guys like Luke Rockhold and guys like Chris Weidman who are quite big. What's your sort of response to that criticism of George going up and doing that fight?
I think it's a fair question in terms of how he deals with the bigger guys. I mean, you've heard Faraz Sahabi before say that he thinks GSP could do 155, and having followed his career and stood next to him, I don't necessarily disagree with that. He'd have to lose some muscle mass, but I mean, he was never a massive 170 or so. Yeah, I mean, I kind of joked, if he won the title at 185, he could immediately relinquish it so he doesn't have to fight Yoel Romero either. Obviously that would be a massive size there. So, I mean, it would be tough. But, I mean, listen, we're talking about George St. Pierre here. I mean, there's very few people, I think, that have earned the right to basically do whatever they want, and he's one of them. I mean, he's one of the most dominant champions in history. So, the whole cutting the line thing or whatever, man, this is George St. Pierre. He has earned the right to take whatever fight he wants, and I think people would buy into it. But yeah, I mean, matching him up with some of those dudes at 185 that are massive beasts, it would be very difficult for him. So I don't know if it's the right long-term play, but I think in the short going right now, it seems to me the right fight to make.
Where do you stand, John, on this other super fight that people are talking about, which is obviously GSP versus Conor McGregor? Because to me, you look at it and you think, well, these are two massive draws, and if they fight each other, obviously one of them, unless it's some kind of insane draw, one of them's going to lose, and you kind of derail that guy. And it's like Conor McGregor is as high as he's ever been in terms of star power, and you've got this Floyd Mayweather fight looming. If he loses, then he'd be going into that fight potentially, if it happens, on a loss, and then his stock takes a bit of a hit. And what do you do then? Do you do another rematch, like Nate Diaz after? Could he even win that one? And then if GSP loses, again, you've got this guy that you've probably brought back and paying a lot of money for, and if he gets, say, knocked out or beaten in his first fight back, he kind of takes a hit. Where do you stand on that whole super fight? Do you think it should happen?
It's funny because the only reason I wouldn't say that one is just because we don't know what the future is for Conor right now. I mean, he seems hell bent on making this Mayweather fight. And so what does George St. Pierre just sit around and wait till the summer to figure out if that's happening or not? So that's the only reason I wouldn't. If we knew that, for instance, that the Mayweather fight wasn't happening, if we knew that Conor wanted to be back in the cage, then hell yes, I think, long term, again, for Asabi said he has believes GSP can make 155 pounds. If he could, I think that fight would be great. And what you're saying is true about now you're going to wreck one of these guys. They're going to lose a lot of momentum. But, the truth is we don't know what the long-term future of either of these guys is. I mean, is George St. Pierre coming back for 1 or 2 fights? I mean, we don't know if he's coming back for 10 fights. You know what I mean? So why not go ahead and cash in now and get the biggest fight you possibly can? Even Conor McGregor. I mean, let's say the Mayweather fight doesn't happen right now, but then, he gets the Mayweather fight somehow later in this year, early next year or whatever. I mean, if he makes $100 million on a fight or 150 or whatever he's hoping to make, I mean, will Conor even A, need to fight again, or B, want to fight again, especially knowing that the purse levels are going to drop back down quite a bit? I mean, so, there's just so many what ifs that's the reason I wouldn't say that's the fight I want for GSP right now, but just because it seems it's so uncertain with Conor. But if Conor wants to fight, then hell yeah, make that fight, because their futures aren't guaranteed. So let's just make the biggest fights we can right now.
So what's going to happen to the winner of Khabib and Tony Ferguson, in your opinion, John? Do you think that there's any chance that person gets Conor McGregor next, or do you think McGregor sort of holds out possibly for this Mayweather fight, or even maybe for a GSP fight or something else?
Man, it's tough to say. I really do feel like, the winner of this is certainly deserving of that fight, and maybe even will just be called champion at some point, depending on what Conor wants to do. I mean, it does seem that Conor is just so dedicated to making this fight happen. It was so much money on it. It's crazy, man. When people first start talking about Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing ever. It's never going to happen. Like, obviously the UFC is involved, but then all of a sudden, every time they mention a word about it, Sports Center picks it up on ESPN, and it's, our bosses at USA Today are hitting us up being like, you guys are definitely writing something on this right now, right? And it's like, no, it's garbage. We're not writing anything about it. They're like, no, we need you to write something about it right now. And the traffic is insane. I mean, anytime we write something on MMA Junkie about it, the traffic it does is nuts. So I think it's becoming more of a reality, just because I think both those guys are realizing there's so much money on the table that it would be silly not to do it. But you still got to make enough money for the UFC as well. So there's such uncertainty right now that it's hard to say. I think they're going to try to find a way to make this fight happen. So I'm not convinced that the winner of this fight ever faces Conor McGregor, to be honest with you. And I'm not convinced that this doesn't go beyond being just an interim title fight, and the winner of this fight eventually gets crowned the real belt. Now, UFC President Dana White, he came out this week and said he expects Conor to face the winner of this fight. Man, we'll see. It's Conor is such a wild card, man, because conventional wisdom and conventional logic of, this is how it's always been in the UFC. Well, this is how, it's blown out of the water, because this guy is such a different presence and such a different force. So it's so hard to use like past knowledge of how things have always done and try to apply that to anything that's going to happen with him.
Yeah, and I mean, we've also seen Dana White deny that Eddie Alvarez and Conor McGregor was going to be happening at UFC 205, and we saw how that turned out. I'm wondering, though, like, obviously you're in Vegas, you are really at the heart of this whole thing. What are you hearing as far as, do you think that there's a way the UFC and Mayweather could sort of co-promote this event together, or do you think it's more likely to happen without the UFC's involvement? Because we see, Conor McGregor posting these cryptic messages, and kind of seems like it flew under the radar a little bit, but he had that one with Lorenzo Fertitta, and then in his pay-per-view, his pay-per-view where he did the Q&A, kind of seemed like he was, throwing out an olive branch to the UFC, but now he sort of seems like, hey, I've got Lorenzo Fertitta in my corner, nobody can stop me. How are you taking these things that he's throwing out there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't read too much into that. I know, even in internal discussions in our staff, some people took that picture to mean a lot. I didn't. I mean, those guys have worked together for a couple of years. They've struck a friendship up. Conor was in Las Vegas to handle other business. There's no reason they wouldn't get together. I mean, Lorenzo ain't got nothing else going on right now. You know what I mean? So, I didn't take too much of that. But no, ultimately, I believe if it gets done, it does get done with the UFC's involvement. I think it has to get done with the UFC's involvement, and it would be some type of co-promotion. Maybe even a three-way promotion if McGregor, really has a piece as Conor McGregor Promotions or whatever. But whether or not that's on title or not, I mean, he's going to get paid as a promoter. So that's the thing that's interesting to me about this, because I think if they try to do it without the UFC, I mean, come on, man, the number of lawyers that work for that company, this thing would be locked up in court immediately. And you've got to think, the court that it would be filed in would be here in Nevada in Clark County. And man, the influence that they have within the state politics here and that sort of thing, with everything that they've done and the tax money that they generate and the connections that they have, I just can't see that looking good for Conor McGregor, because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, you can go through and there's been legal arguments laid out how you can apply the Ali Act and you can file this, but that's all untested waters, and it's all time creeping away. You know what I mean? Let's say it takes 3 years to get done in court and he finally wins. Do people still care as much in 3 years? I don't know. And does he want to make $0 in the interim and pay these legal fees and time? You mean, you know what I'm saying? So it's like the athlete, man, the biggest thing against them is time. And if the UFC is able to just stall things out in court, I mean, that would be a huge negative for Conor and for Floyd as well. I mean, who's obviously 40 years old now. So, he wants to probably get this thing done as soon as possible. So, I think, if it does get done, it has to get done with the UFC's involvement to make sure it works properly.
Well, let's have a little bit of fun with this. I mean, if the UFC does get included in this thing with Mayweather and McGregor, and this card looks like it will happen, what do you think the undercard would look like? We saw some rumors of people really wanting to see this Anderson Silva Roy Jones Jr. boxing match being the co-main event of the night. Would you be down with something like that, John? And what are a couple of other matchups you could throw at us that you think would be fun to be under there?
It's so crazy, right? I mean, that would just be silly. But I mean, Anderson wanted that fight forever, so maybe it would. But I have to believe that the undercard would be crap. To be honest with you, I mean, that's the boxing model, right? I mean, I'm assuming this would be, a boxing fight in a boxing ring. Of course, Floyd Mayweather would never compete in mixed martial arts. I mean, he would get destroyed in mixed martial arts, and I think, while he'll never admit that, I think he knows that, and he's not going to allow himself to be in that type of position. So, it's got to be a boxing match in a boxing ring. And I think, just the way the boxing model is, you don't put anything on the undercard because you don't want to have any additional expenditures. It's crazy. I don't know if you guys have ever been to a major boxing event. I've only been to a handful. I mean, I don't cover boxing full time, but it's amazing because, like, at an MMA event at MGM, there's not like a ton of people for the first fight, but there's at least a couple thousand in there, right? And all the media's in their seats for the first fight because you want to watch the whole card. In boxing, it's crazy. I went to a Mayweather fight, and there were 400 credentialed media, and I was one of two on the floor for the first fight of the night. It was at MGM Grand Garden Arena. I could literally count the people that were in the stands. It was like 20 people in the stands. As the fighters were walking to the ring, I could hear the conversations going on with them and their corner. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And even the main card, it's nuts. Like, people kind of start showing up a little bit, but really, like, the people are in the casino drinking and gambling, having fun, and don't file in until the main event. And then it's nuts because a major boxing event, when it's time for the main event, it actually does feel very there's a buzz, man. There's an energy in there that actually rivals or even tops the peak moment at a UFC event. But top to bottom, it's not even close. I mean, the UFC is entertainment the night through. So, I say all that to say it's fun to play fantasy matchmaker, but I guarantee you they wouldn't want to spend anything because that would be cutting into Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor's money, and they don't want any piece of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We haven't covered major boxing events, so that is a tremendous amount of interesting and entertaining insight there. All right, let's go back to UFC 209 as we wrap up with you, John. There are 3 big fights here that we'd like to get your predictions on, just sort of off the top of your head. Let's start with Mark Hunt versus Alistair Overeem. This is the rematch since 2008. What's your inkling here? What do you think is going to happen in this one?
In my staff picks this week, I went with Mark Hunt in that one. And I mean, of course, this is the quintessential, whoever lands first is the guy that wins kind of fight, right? I mean, either one of these guys can win. But it does seem like Alistair Overeem's, I don't want to say his chin is suspect, but, we've seen him get hurt on the feet. And Mark Hunt, you got to think he's coming in with something to prove, right? I mean, he's got to have a chip on his shoulder. He's got to be pissed off and wanting to just, send a message to everybody out there. So, I feel like Mark Hunt, is not going to be facing a wrestler the caliber of Brock Lesnar here, and I feel like he's facing a slightly lessened version of Alistair Overeem here, and Mark Hunt, as you guys know very well, only needs to land one shot. That's all he needs to land. And I feel like Alistair has been susceptible to those types of shots as of late, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and apparently he's been very, very focused on training Hunt for this one, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of Mark Hunt we see. Let's talk about the fight that most people are looking forward to the most, and a fight that's been in the works for a really long time. We've been excited for it for such a long time and looking forward to it for ages. Ferguson versus Khabib. This is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Tell us, how do you see this going?
Whew, man, I'm flopping back and forth on this one. I'm not going to lie, man. I turned in my pick for our staff as Khabib Nurmagomedov, and you're right, man. I love this fight. I mean, this feels like the main event in a lot of ways, and that's no disrespect to Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson, but this fight is so good on paper. But I tell you what, man, I was watching some content last night, some breakdowns of some old fights, and just kind of sitting around the house, killing some time, watching footage of both those guys, and man, Tony Ferguson might just be the right guy. You know what I mean? He's so hard to take down. He's dangerous off his back, but he doesn't get stuck on his back. I see fighters sometimes that get too comfortable on their back because, they don't feel like they're in danger. But next thing you know, they've been on their back for 4 minutes and they just gave away the round because, they felt safe there. I don't feel like Tony Ferguson's one of those guys. It's like, can he stuff every Nurmagomedov takedown? No, probably not. But can he pop right back up? Yeah, he probably can. And what about on the feet, man? I mean, I think Tony Ferguson's striking just keeps getting better and better and better. And while Khabib's is better as well, he's still kind of loopy sometimes. And obviously he got tagged a little bit by Michael Johnson last time out. So, oh man, dude, I am so excited for this one. I'm still leaning towards Nurmagomedov, but if you start hearing me a little closer, making some different picks, I gotta say, man, I'm going back and forth, and I think Tony Ferguson might be the exact right guy to beat Khabib.
Yeah, we'll be watching closely on fight day, seeing you in the front row with that blue polo, seeing if you're changing your mind in the last second. Now, let's talk about the main event. Obviously, Stephen Thompson versus Tyron Woodley. I mean, this fight is an amazing rematch, and in some ways, it's almost getting overshadowed with all this noise with Ferguson and Khabib. Who are you leaning towards with Thompson and Woodley?
Yeah, I went towards Tyron Woodley in their original meeting in 205, and I'm going that way again. A really interesting way, the way Tyron fought the first time around. Didn't use his wrestling nearly as much as I thought he would. So I'll be interested to see if he goes to more of that. He looked good, on the feet, but Stephen Thompson is so dangerous there. So I'll be interested to see if Woodley goes to his wrestling a little bit more. But I'm leaning Woodley slightly again as well here. I still think Wonder Boy is a fantastic fighter. He's one of the most exciting guys in the division. But I thought Woodley had just a slight bit of edge in the first fight. And I think after seeing them together for 25 minutes, I'm going to stick with that.
Well, there you guys go. He is John Morgan, the man himself. You can catch all of his awesome work on MMA Junkie, including the awesome event coverage that's coming up for UFC 209 that you guys do not want to miss. So make sure to go on the website.
Do I get to ask a question?
Oh, you get a question for sure. I mean, come on. This is a long-time relationship. You're always welcome to ask us questions.
Who are you guys picking with Dan Kelly and Rashad Evans?
Dan Kelly, Dad's Army, 100%. Make the bet. Bet the house.
I mean, look, it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, okay, Dan Kelly probably doesn't have a chance because Rashad Evans is an absolute killer. But if you kind of look at Rashad's last few fights, also the fact that he's been away with some health problems, sometimes you look at what Dan Kelly can do and the fact that, he is a pretty good grappler himself, a good judo guy and pretty durable, you sort of given him a bit more of a chance. I mean, look, most likely Rashad Evans will go in there and do what he does best, and there's no doubt about the fact that there's a lot of advantages there, especially in the striking. But we wouldn't be, it's MMA, and we wouldn't be surprised if Dad's Army really takes this one and surprises the world. And John, this better than most because you're always down here for all the fight night cards. Dan Kelly, he has surprised fans almost from the very get-go. Apart from that one loss to Sam Alvey, he has been improving and beating opponents left and right that people think we're going to destroy him. So to him, this is no different, and he's got that Olympian's mindset.
I love it, man. It's when the fight was first announced, it's kind of one where you scratch your head a little bit. But then I thought, man, I really like this. You know, I mean, you said it. I don't think most Americans might understand like how big of a fan base Dan Kelly has there, man. It's just amazing how popular he is, how respected he is. You know what I mean? I don't think people here in the States probably understand that. It's been really special watching him fight down there in Australia. I've been honored to do it. And I think this is a great moment for him. I mean, yeah, my pick is Rashad Evans. It seems like the smart pick, right? But, I mean, look, this is a new step for Rashad as well, right? I mean, does his body handle it well? Does the cage rust get to him? I mean, all the question marks really are around Rashad Evans, right? I mean, what a moment this would be for Dan Kelly if he's able to beat the former champ Rashad Evans in Vegas on this amazing card. I mean, I don't know how much, you know, he plans on continuing to fight on. Obviously, he's getting up there a little bit, but you're right, man. He has shocked the world over and over. He has silenced the critics and the haters every time, and I'm actually very intrigued by this fight. So apologize for, taking over your excellent wrap-up there and transition into break, but I had to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, you completely derailed us, John. But no, in all honesty, I'm just going to go with everybody else that I'm picking Rashad Evans just because of his history on paper. You have to. And, I mean, I've always gone against Dan Kelly, and he's always surprised me. So I'm hoping that he can do it again. I think this is the fight where if he does win, if he does surprise everybody, he stops being underestimated, and I think people start finally, picking him as the favorite. But there he is, guys, before he so rudely interrupted. John Morgan, you can catch all of his awesome work on MMA Junkie, including the amazing event coverage that him and the crew do on I was going to say weekly basis. They're not every single week with these UFC events anymore, but they are, I think, the only outlet that are at every single UFC event, so you don't want to miss that. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at MMA Junkie John, and of course follow the awesome podcast at the MMA Roadshow as well. Make sure to listen to their 100th episode. If it's your first time listening, it is a great place to start. John, as always, man, it's a great honor and a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, you can catch our next guest, amazing breakdowns and analysis on the Fight Network and UFC.com. One of the best in the game, a man who's always a joy to have on the program, Robin Black. Welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Hey, guys. Doing killer. Yeah, it's fight week. I'm pretty pumped.
I know. It's a killer time to have you on the program. I mean, there's so much to talk about, and fans are so excited for UFC 209 right around the corner. And there's a lot to discuss, a lot of great and interesting matchups all throughout the card. But the first one, which we really want to touch on with you, Robin, is this rematch between Mark Hunt and Alistair Overeem. For those who don't remember and sort of started watching MMA more recently, the pair did first meet in Japan in 2008, a fight in which Overeem caught Hunt in a submission. The two guys, you could say, are very, very, very different fighters now as before they meet at UFC 209. Robin, what would you say are the keys here for Hunt and Alistair going into the fight this weekend?
This is one of those, they're at such a high level, these guys. They're at such a high level that Alistair's got to be in there and really flowy and really just feel the fight, because he's been winning. He's been performing at a high level by kind of outsmarting guys. Even Junior Dos Santos, who's a great striker, he's kind of played tricks on them. Arlovsky as well, big time. And he's done stuff from southpaw stance that are kind of fairly simple to him, but pretty complex to a lot of MMA fighters, and they're not going to be complicated to Hunt. So he can't just kind of outthink Hunt. He's got to go out there and really go and be free to fight him. And that isn't how he's been fighting lately. Whereas Hunt, on the other hand, he, obviously he wants to get to Alistair. I don't think, he doesn't get taken down very easily anymore. So I think he wants to do what he does, move towards you, land big shots, and really use little subtleties on the feet. It's a really high-level fight. Like, as a heavyweight mixed martial arts contest, especially on the feet, it's about as high level as you get when you get these two guys against each other again.
You mentioned Mark Hunt. Obviously, some of the biggest questions surrounding Mark Hunt, which we'll find out in the next few days, are just how this lawsuit plays out. Will he be at media day? Will he be getting mic time, etc.? And that kind of plays into just, I guess, how motivated he is going into this fight. But where do you see him at this point of his career? And, if he does stay in shape in between camps and if he does focus on his training, do you think he's still got a shot at getting that title?
Yeah, Mark Hunt is one of these guys that it's so easy to forget how talented they are. And, the interesting thing for me about the lawsuit and about all that kind of stuff leading up to it, that's all real. There's no doubt about it. It'll affect some more than others. Those things tend to affect the super experienced guys less. There's nothing Mark Hunt hasn't seen before. Now, being beat up by a guy who fails drug tests and suing people, this is outside of the realm of normal. But the variety of weird things happening, he's got used to many weird things happening. So it may be better for him to, than it would for the average fighter. And on the other hand, also, emotions are often bad for fighting. They tend to be bad. But at the highest level, these guys who have really sort of developed and parts of their skill and their technique and all the things that they've learned are just parts of their skin and their blood now. Guys like that can use emotion, the tint and the flavor of emotion in very positive ways. And an angry Mark Hunt is a lot more likely to be performing at a high level than an angry low-level fighter. And so that emotion, I think, is going to be really interesting how that comes out with him. And Alistair, the antidote to that is be as calm as humanly possible against that, if that is what he sees.
It's going to be a fascinating matchup. Now, speaking of title fights, there's a big rematch between Wonderboy and Woodley in the main event of the card. Before we discuss the rematch, what did you think of their first fight, UFC 205? Because a lot of people were surprised and impressed with Woodley. What was your main takeaway from that fight?
I was really impressed with Woodley. We had seen Wonderboy at the time, Hendricks, Ellenberger, guys who are somewhat at the root level, somewhat the similar prototype. We know Woodley today is stronger than those two guys today. But the prototype is not all that dissimilar. And you saw just how Wonderboy, it felt like he had evolved to a point that he exists to beat wrestle boxers. You know what I mean? And we were seeing him, Holly, Conor. We were seeing these kind of complicated movers being able to do that. And I did expect that. I really, especially after seeing what Wonderboy did with Rory. The fact that Rory couldn't get to him, I was like, man, Tyrone's never going to get to him. And he did. And that was really impressive. It's a fun thing to be shocked by how good somebody is when you already thought they were very good. And that's what Woodley did. I was pretty impressed. I was pretty blown away. Nobody else was landing clean shots on this guy, and Woodley was getting to him. And it was, yes, he's fast, and yes, he's strong, but little subtleties in the footwork and little adjustments in the angle that he was entering at was part of the key. But so I was blown away by his performance. I did think it was a draw. I really did. I thought he had 2 brilliant rounds, and Wonderboy had 3 rounds that he edged him. And as a result, the math adds up. If one of those are a 10-8, you got yourself a draw. So I'm excited for this fight. I think Woodley wants to do exactly the same things he did well, and even a little more. And he had great success. Wonderboy has some adjustments to make, but he got the information. He gathered new data in that fight, and he's going to be able to make adjustments.
Do you think... and I guess that's what makes this such a hard fight to predict, because it really didn't go anybody's... it really didn't go the way that most people predicted. Do you think this is sort of going to be a continuation of their first fight from last year, really close back and forth fight that, may go to a decision? Or do you see it going differently now that both men have sort of been in the octagon together before? You mentioned they've collected data, they've made adjustments. Do you think one of them can go in there and kind of shock the other and maybe get an early stoppage?
Would any of us we saw that fight between these two humans, these two human artists, and it was really fascinating, and we can see it, we can picture in our minds it going similar, but we can also picture Wonderboy going in and taking what he did that in theory exists to beat this kind of fighter, and elevating that to a level that Woodley doesn't get to touch him a lot. It could definitely happen. Some little adjustments have to be made. He did some of that data that he gathered is this guy's strength and speed. I didn't love, so you could see that happening. What I didn't love was hearing that Stephen Thompson went to add muscle. Sometimes you're looking for that would suggest one possibility is that after experiencing this guy's strength and how hard he was to get out from under in particular, he felt he needed more strength. But I don't think you're going to beat Tyron Woodley by becoming stronger. I know that wouldn't be the only adaptation he makes, but you beat strength with skill. And so I didn't love hearing that as as somebody who is picturing a Wonder Boy performance like that, I didn't like hearing that, but it is a fascinating fight. And the fact that it is a rematch and it was so close just makes it all the more interesting.
Since we're talking about welterweight, Robin, just want to quickly ask you, who do you think should get the next title shot after these two men do battle this weekend? Who do you think should be next?
Whew, that is a really, I mean, Damian Maia should be fighting at this level for a title. You know, it's an undeniable what he's done. I mean, you go in and you put away Carlos Condit, for example, and that's one point to looking at what he's done. It's incredible. And when you see this level of martial arts, it's fascinating to see. We're almost seeing a new evolved moment of how the styles match up. And regardless of if it was Wonder Boy or Woodley, I want to see how Damian Maia fights both of those guys. George St. Pierre, Ramdeen and I spent a couple hours with him a couple months back, and he said he thought Wonder Boy would be able to beat Woodley ultimately. That didn't happen the first fight, but George still thinks in the long run that'll happen, and he thinks Damian Maia will beat Stephen Thompson. And he knows everybody, and he knows everybody in that picture pretty well. So that was a GSP prediction.
Well, I wonder where he fits into that picture, you know, assuming that he even does come back at welterweight. But looking at UFC 209 for the moment, I mean, the big fight here for a lot of people, and the fight that we've been waiting for a long, long time and sort of talking it for a long time, is this Ferguson-Khabib fight. And, I mean, you did a phenomenal breakdown, but we actually saw, obviously, as everyone else did, that Khabib blocked you on Twitter after that breakdown was released.
Yep.
How and when did you first notice, and have you heard from the camp as to why they did that?
Yeah, it was, I guess, something between Ali and myself, and we're friends now. So we spoke earlier today, and we're friends now. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what it was. I like Ali, and I respect him. I mean, this is a guy who manages, and by all accounts, brilliantly, some of the biggest fighters and best fighters in the world, fighters I admire. Frankie Edgar, Cody Garbrandt, Khabib. For them to say, this is my guy, that'll carry some weight with you. But at the same time, he and I have had weird and different interactions before. So something in that relationship between me and him, I think. I don't know that Khabib himself has even seen the breakdown. I don't know. But all's well that ends well. I mean, that's a guy who is involved with some really high-level people and does a cool job with cool fighters that I know. And he's done, I mean, by all accounts, he is, as a manager, has taken care of Cody and Frankie, and I'm sure Khabib, on levels that most managers don't achieve. So good for those guys, and I'm glad to work that out. I personally am not a fan of having too many, disruptions or controversies or any of that kind of thing. So I'm always relieved when that's not the case. So also that ends well. I'm sure, it was interesting to watch when I know that it was somebody else, in this case Ali or somebody else on the team, that was handling his Twitter. But people right away were like messaging me going, oh, if Khabib is distracted by breakdowns, he's going to lose the fight and all this kind of crazy stuff, when it wasn't even him. But, I was speaking to a friend and he said, these days, the smallest things make the biggest stories. And part of me, I'm glad that, 250,000 people ended up seeing the breakdown. I'm really proud of the breakdown. But part of me is also weirded out that we all are passionate enough about the things that we're passionate about to go into these little minutiae of things on social media and relationships and stuff. It's weird to me. I like the fights. I like the fighters. I like the techniques. I like the truth of what happens in the cage. That's what I'm passionate about. But I think more people talk about Twitter than the actual breakdown itself. So that makes me think I got a lot of work to do.
No. I mean, that's just the way the world is these days, Rob. I mean, social media and Twitter. If you look back on sports media 30, 40 years ago, it was a completely different situation. I think now gossip and all the stuff that's going on, I think a lot of people just like to talk about that. But the breakdown was really, really good. We really enjoyed it, and we have to discuss this fight. I mean, me and Casper are really excited about it. When we spoke to Tony, he said he wanted to make a statement by beating Khabib on the ground. I mean, the big question here is, do you believe Ferguson's grappling can pose a danger to Khabib?
The truth is, we don't know. And, maybe after I get off the phone, I'll try to call Eddie and try to get a little more insight. I know Eddie Bravo's been working with him specifically, and Eddie's brilliant. And we know Eddie's brilliant, but Khabib is brilliant, and nobody's been able to deal with him on the ground. Would it be really cool to see that Tony is capable of it? It would. It would be cool to see that an athlete has developed to that level in all areas. Because Tony's pretty free in most areas, but we're looking at a specialist in Khabib, a guy who nobody's had a good minute against him on the ground, to my knowledge. So, I think it's cool that Tony, Eddie, and those guys go into it with the belief and the knowledge and the approach that they can handle him on the ground. I do. I don't think you should fight somebody like that with the I can't go to the ground. I can't go to the ground. It's a worse. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then you get really hurt and beat up on the ground. So I think it's the right approach. Do I think he has the ability to do it? I don't know. I really don't know. This among all the other things. This is one of the reasons I got to see this fight. I got to see what Khabib does when he gets in. I got to see what happens when Khabib passes through that zone. I talked about snap down city that Tony uses. What happens when he passes in there? Can he just eliminate that threat, or is that threat in play right off the bat? What happens if Tony's under him? Can he regard it all? Because Khabib's passing game is insane. If he does regard, can he stop the pass? And if he accomplishes that, can he lock him down? And if he accomplishes that, can he do damage to him? Those are a lot of things, and they believe they can do it, and that's fascinating to see. This is the fight probably on earth that's booked right now that I'm the most excited to see.
There's a lot of layers to get through when it comes to these guys being successful. Ground zero, as you refer to it in your breakdown, is where Khabib does his best work. And after having a bit of trouble with Johnson on the feet, do you think we'll see an improved Khabib on his feet? And do you think this is still the best area for Ferguson to capitalize? And do you think Khabib will even really test himself on the feet much in this fight at all? Or do you think that Johnson fight will sort of teach him to just really stick to what he does best?
It's hard to say. I don't know his personality. A lot of what you see when you try to study him from a personality standpoint is you see what he wants you to see. You do see sort of a coldness, which is cool. But some of that is just language and stuff. You wonder how much ego exists in him. I mean, because he is a dangerous man everywhere. He knows he's a dangerous man everywhere, and I don't think he takes too kindly to the idea that Tony, or anybody else is better than him anywhere, or that he has to do anything, that he needs the takedown or else he'll lose. I don't think he believes that on any level. So because of all that, maybe he will engage him on the feet. Personally, my opinion, when you are Damian Maia or Khabib Nurmagomedov or Brock Lesnar or Ronda when she was beating everybody the way she was beating everyone, or anyone who has that ability to close the distance, take you down, and really, really run you, I always think, let's do it. Let's do it. But at the same time, there are a lot of threats there. But honestly, would I be surprised to see Tony or to see Khabib land insane shots or hurt Tony or win on the feet? I would not be surprised. These athletes are brilliant. But we see areas where he is so dominant. That is that range one, the chest to chest and ground zero on the ground. So my inclination, if I'm him and his people, is let's get it there. But it's not ever as simple as that.
And I mean, look, before we let you go, because you're a busy man, Robin, final question about the fight. The mental game is strong between these two. Tony has a lot of belief in his abilities, like you mentioned. Khabib doesn't really seem too frazzled, even though they sort of do go back and forth, and they went back and forth on the conference call. And Khabib does sort of confront people. It looks like it doesn't really bother him when it comes to fighting. Where do you see these guys mentally going into this fight? Do you see them as both having mental strengths, or do you think maybe a part of them maybe starting to get worn down a little bit with this back and forth that keeps going on?
No, I think they're iron. And, when you see the true great fights, when you see Rory versus Lawler, or you see Condit and Lawler, what you're kind of getting is the elite of the elite mentally too. When neither guy can be mentally shook, that's when you get the best fights. And I think that's the case here. I mean, Khabib has never, ever lost to anybody. he's not going to get shook by Tony. He's going to go in and do his thing. And Tony seems like an iron rock. I don't know if you saw the footage of him kicking the shit out of his heavy bag until the thing exploded. That's how he thinks. That is a metaphor for how the guy thinks about fighting and how he thinks about his opponent. So we're in for the best fight, and I'm just insanely pumped to see it. You guys know, and we chatted about it. Doo Ho Choi versus Cub Swanson, how brilliant most of us thought that fight was. That was another one of those things. Cub Swanson, Doo Ho Choi refused to be broken, and Cub Swanson refused to be discouraged. And we're getting the same scenario here with these two guys mentally.
Yeah, it's the old saying of the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. So, I mean, UFC 209 is this weekend, Saturday in America, Sunday in Australia. If you're listening, make sure to get ready for it by watching Robin's awesome breakdown, which is now available on the Fight Network YouTube page. And, of course, follow Robin Black on Twitter at RobinBlackMMA to avoid missing out on his awesome, awesome work. Robin, we can't thank you enough for coming down and sharing your knowledge. It's always fun, and it's always a fun ride. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you guys. I'm on my way to the airport now, heading for Vegas. And enjoy the hostilities, my friends.
Awesome. That's what a perfect way to end it, man. Have a great ride and enjoy the fights.
Cheers. Rock on.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys, our next guest is making his return to the program for the very first time in over 2 years. He was the first ever BJJ black belt in Ireland, the founder and head coach of Straight Blast Gym in Dublin, Ireland, where he coaches such fighters as Gunnar Nelson, Artem Lobov, James Gallagher, and of course, Conor McGregor. He will also be coming down to Australia in April for his live shows, Win or Learn an Evening with John Kavanagh, and there are only two of them. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. John, it's been a while. We've missed you. Welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going?
Yeah, how's it going? It's great to be back. I missed you guys too.
Well, we really appreciate the time, John. We know you're a very, very busy man these days, and you've been doing a lot of traveling recently. Tell us, where are you joining us from at the moment?
I'm joining it from my living room, where I've just eaten my own body weight in pancakes because it's Pancake Tuesday, and it is after 11 p.m.
Very nice, very nice. We can't lie. We're a little bit jealous. I'm just curious. How does John Kavanagh have his pancakes? Are you a lemon and sugar kind of guy? Are we talking maple syrup, or do you go a bit of fruit?
Actually, almost everything you said there. I went for a couple with golden syrup, and then I had the last one with lemon and sugar. And then my girlfriend spoils me. She cuts up strawberries and puts blueberries around the side of the plate for the presentation.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have a lot of good pancakes here in Australia, so we're looking forward for you to come down next month in April to do these two live on-stage shows where me and Casper will actually be interviewing you and chatting about your life and experiences and philosophies, and then the fans will get an opportunity to do a bit of a Q&A and ask their own questions. John, what made you want to do something like this and share your story on this side of the world?
Well, I mean, I've always wanted to go over there. I've never had the opportunity. I was kind of half waiting for a UFC to visit and me have a fighter on the card so I could kind of mix business with pleasure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends is moved over there over 10 years ago, and then just recently SBG Sydney has opened with arguably my first ever real BJJ coach running it, Ben Power. So I have a few reasons to visit there, and now it just worked out with this tour. So it all just worked out, and it wasn't easy trying to carve out. Basically, I'm gone for a month out of my gym, which is a long time. It's actually the longest I've been out of the country in I don't know how many years. So it all just worked out well, and I'm really, really excited to get over there.
Yeah, that must be somewhat nerve-wracking as well, obviously leaving your gym and leaving Ireland for a whole month. And, I mean, even though you're no stranger to media and getting a lot of attention these days, does this kind of blow your mind that there's such a demand to have you share your journey all over the world? I mean, obviously there are a lot of fantastic coaches all over the world in MMA, but, you know, they're not being flown to Australia or even other places to share their life experiences. Is that kind of surreal for you that you've reached that level?
You know, I almost don't believe it, and I'm waiting for the guys to send me the tickets, and if two people show up on the night, we'll have a bit of crack with it. But I don't really get it, if I'm being honest, but I'm going to do my best when I get over there to entertain and get across the what made the story go our way over the last decade or so. But yeah, it's surreal to me to think that some people are going to show up to hear some guy from Ireland talk about MMA and how he got to where he is. But I'm extremely grateful that they are.
A funny story from 2 years ago when you were on the program last was when you sort of talked to us about a funny story about how when you go grocery shopping, if somebody asks you where the onions are, they'll address you by name because they recognize you. And this was way back before Conor McGregor even fought Dennis Siver. So tell us, what's it like these days? It must be impossible for you to walk into any kind of shop or go up to the letterbox without being spotted.
Very true. For the most part, it's enjoyable. People come up and they just want to say, you know, the story has moved them or they've taken some inspiration from where they've gone. But I'm not going to lie, the last couple of weeks have been a bit rough. Literally every person stops me and says, so, is the Mayweather fight happening? That's getting a bit tiring.
That's hilarious. Well, I mean, we're going to add 2 more people to that list in just a moment. But, I mean, that interview that we did with you from 2 years ago, I was actually listening to it the other day, and it's still very fascinating and worth a listen for anyone who hasn't checked it out. And you mentioned then how you never got into MMA for money or for fame, and how, you know, even when there was no guaranteed future ahead in MMA, you and your team, even going back to the days of training in the garage, as you called it, you guys just had to grind away to, you know, improve and become the best martial artist that you could be. When you look at how far you've come now and all the success you've achieved, are there still things that you want to achieve in your career and goals that haven't been reached, John? Or have you sort of been able to pretty much tick all the boxes from when you sort of started, and is the rest now just basically icing on the cake?
You know, right from day one, my very first gym, it's like you said, we sometimes refer to it as the garage or as the shed. And I started that 16 years ago when I come out of university. And one of the very first guys to walk in my door was an Aussie, a purple belt, Ben Power. He now runs SBG Sydney, and he got me going. He was back then, 16 years ago. If you met a purple belt, you were basically meeting God. We were all a bunch of raw white belts, and he gave me a great start. Now, to answer your question, have I any more goals? Honestly, I'd see it. I'm obviously very strongly associated with Conor McGregor and all his success, but I would see it as somewhat as a failure as a coach to produce one person that's reached the top. I want it for my own self, to be honest, more than anything else. I want to show myself that the training methods and the how we go about doing things is an effective way, and to do that, you got to produce more than one champion.
I mean, when you're coming down here in Australia, the shows that we're doing will be April 7th in Sydney, and then the next one, April 18th in Melbourne. But we have to find out, apart from visiting the beautiful SBG gym in Sydney, what are some of the other ideas that you've got or plans that you want to sort of tick off your list to do in Australia? I mean, we've spoken to fighters who wanted to go diving with the sharks, climb buildings, go to the beaches, surf waves. What are some of the things that you've sort of got planned for your trip? Some of the fun ideas, some of the fun things you want to get accomplished?
You know, I literally today my girlfriend sent me a video, and it was called, what was it called? Face Death? Something like this. And it was, you're basically in a tank with a crocodile that looked like it was about 20 meters long and weighed about 2 tons. But I saw the address was Darwin, so I don't think my girlfriend didn't realize so far that it is from Sydney. But I guess we're going to be mostly around Sydney and Melbourne. In Sydney is where my friend I spoke about there, Ben Power, is, and also my long time friend Rob Byrne. He was a citizen now of your great country, but he left Ireland over 10 years ago. So I'm going to just be hanging out with them, and I'm going to leaning on them to give me the tour of Sydney and show me all the cool spots. I'm pretty open and pretty open-minded guy. Probably my girlfriend's a bit more of a risk taker than me. She'd want to get in the water with the great whites and all your killer animals out there. I'll probably sit on the side of the boat and throw fish guts in there just to see how she gets on with them. But other than that, yeah, I'm just, like I said, I've never been that side of the planet, and I'm a spider fan. I keep tarantulas, so I'm big into kind of those sort of animals. So to be able to see them in the wildlife will be huge to me.
Oh, well, that's good. Death is always near, basically, when you're hanging with John Kavanagh. Now, you've always got your hands full with other fighters, obviously, like Artem Lobov and, Makwan and James Gallagher and Peter Queally and others. But considering the whirlwind year you've had last year and with, Conor having no fights scheduled and currently being away indefinitely, what's that been like for you? Have you sort of found it that you've got a bit more downtime? You enjoy being able to take, kind of lay low a little bit, or is it still as crazy as ever?
Yeah, your finger's on the pulse, all right. On what you said, I have to be honest and say I thought that was how it was going to be when, last year was a bit crazy with him and we did the big fight at the end of the year and he got the second belt. And in my own head, I was thinking, okay, 2017, I'm going to focus on some other things and he's probably going to take some time off. And then, of course, the talk of the boxing fight took off. But even more than that, the rest of the fight team just start really things taking off. I mean, Gallagher's career's gone to the next level, another win in Bellator. I've got a couple of other fighters on Bellator and then a bunch of other pros that are so close to kind of getting to the next level. My gym membership is up at 800 now. We're talking at moving gyms. Me and my girlfriend are looking at buying our first house together. A tour, obviously, a month in Australia. So the days seem to be getting longer, but I'm enjoying them more and more every day.
Well, earlier this month, he tweeted out, "A drought is usually followed by a storm. It has only begun." And then on Valentine's Day, he said, "Other big announcements imminent." Can you elaborate? What did you mean by those tweets?
Yeah, I will. My mother got on to me about them, so I clearly wasn't clear. I wasn't clear on what I meant. The big fight announcement imminent was about one of my pros, Ian Pascu. We were trying to get him on the Cage Warriors card, and it didn't happen. But then he was announced as co-main event on ACB in Manchester, which is a big European show. And Artem got a big fight. Gunnar Nelson got a big fight. So for me, who's not just concerned about one of my fighters, I have a big team. For me, that was a drought being suddenly, a lot of fights being announced, and Artem being main event, Gunny getting on the main card, Ian Pascu getting co-main event on a big show in Europe. All of those were like big announcements for me. I get, and I sometimes forget, that most people who read my tweets probably just hear about Conor, so I could see how it was misinterpreted, but that I wasn't referring to him in any way.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of people expected it as something to do with Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. And, I mean, you mentioned it before. I mean, you got to give it to us straight. From 0 to 100%, how close is this fight to becoming a reality, John?
I can't answer that because it seems I'm not privy to all that's going on. I'm a bit lost in my own world with MMA, and I've got all my own fighters, and my gym is really taken off. And like I said, I'm trying to buy a house and so on and so forth. It seems like it's coming. When or how definite, I don't know. But it's looking more likely, and the two guys seem to want it, and they're making moves towards it. But I won't lie, I don't know. Is the short answer. There seems to be a lot of steps to get over with various commissions involved and different promotions involved and so on and so forth. But it's a fight that's gaining more and more momentum every day, and more people want to see it. So if you're asked just me, my personal uneducated opinion on it, I would say that I believe it's going to happen.
I mean, in your great book, you talk about how McGregor first came to you and he was more of a boxer and you sort of turned him into an MMA fighter. When you sort of think about this fight, are you a fan of this? Because a lot of people are saying, obviously, Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers of all time. Not many people are giving McGregor a chance in this. It's a lot of people are being skeptical about it. Are you a fan of this move? Are you a fan of this fight happening?
100%. I love challenges in his less so. Conor's a lot more competitive than me, but I would love the challenge of it and the spectacle of it and the level of interest. I mean, back in the day, it was Muhammad Ali and God, his name escapes me now, but the first kind of MMA/boxing fight. The rules were a bit weird. But,
against Inoki?
Sorry, exactly. Yeah, that's who it was. I would love to see the challenge of it for Conor to test himself in that area. I'll be honest, like right from the beginning, I've been used to hearing, you can't do this, you can't do that, you won't train somebody up to a UFC level coming from Ireland. You don't have wrestling or grappling. It's impossible to fight for a world title. It's impossible to hold 2 world titles. It's impossible to have a 1,000 square meter gym dedicated to MMA. So I've just heard those things my whole life, and yet here I am. I'm talking to you, and I've a best-selling book, and I'm coming to Australia to talk about that, and I've got a world renowned gym. So we're kind of used to being told what we can't do, but we don't pay too much attention to it. We just get on with it and make things happen.
And we got to ask you, John, sort of just before we let you go and as we wrap up, obviously your job is just to train Conor, and you're not sort of worried about, whatever obstacle comes your way, you just have to deal with it. But when you have all these opportunities and all these possibilities, and you've got Mayweather, you've got GSP, obviously GSP's now coming back, which one are you sort of leaning towards? Which one stands out to you more?
There's kind of 2 ways of looking at it. Like, my love is MMA. That's the sport that I love. I think any other combat sport is a subset of mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts is the freest form of combat sport there is. So that's my love. So, and I'm a big fan of Conor's fighting in MMA. So, yeah, my number one thing would be Conor to fight MMA. That's my number one thing. That's my selfish number one, what I would like to see. Which opponent? I've said it before, the Nate rematch interests me a lot because it's 1-1 and how the styles match up. Almost on a par with that, not much difference, would be the winner of Khabib and Ferguson this weekend. I think Khabib does it, so I think Khabib will be the winner. So Khabib will be the matchup out of that. Below that would be GSP, purely because GSP was an incredible fighter, big fan of him. I've learned a lot from watching his fights. Mm-hmm. But it's a long time since he's fought, and the game changes very, very quickly. And I think Khabib is sort of like a better version of GSP. Although we don't know. It's hard to tell how GSP and Khabib would match up. But, MMA-wise, Nate or almost on a par, winner of Khabib Ferguson.
So just on that, John, I mean, Dana White said it in the post-fight press conference that McGregor will defend his belt against the winner of that fight. Do you think it's likely that we see McGregor defend his belt at least once against one of those guys, depending who wins this weekend?
I find it hard to imagine not seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
Even with Conor getting the if and when the Mayweather fight was to happen, and he got that out of the way, I know, like myself, I do believe his true love is free combat sport, and there is no freer combat sport than mixed martial arts. And he is the UFC lightweight champion. I mean, he did only win it a couple of months ago, so he is the lightweight champion. So I can't imagine him not fighting the winner of that. Now we got to see what happens with the Mayweather talks and all that, but yeah, I do believe that will happen. Yes.
All right, John. Well, we could chat with you forever, but unfortunately we have to let you go. The great thing is that we'll get that opportunity next month when you come down and we can hang out on stage and everybody can join in and participate. Before we do let you go, do you have any messages for your Australian fans about what they can expect? Obviously when you do come down, we know you're very humbled, and also we have to ask, will you be doing any seminars? Because that's the other big question that we're getting nonstop. Is John Kavanagh going to be doing seminars as well?
Yeah, I've just been waiting for a kind of exact details of flights. I'm trying to extend my stay to stay a bit longer, but I'm 100% going to be teaching at SPG Sydney, and I will probably drop in on 1 or 2 sessions from the Winter Warrior crowd that Richie Clanny has out there. I believe the season's going in Sydney and Melbourne, so 100% doing that. As for the night, you guys are so knowledgeable about MMA. I'm really looking forward to having a kind of an educated conversation on mixed martial arts, and I know there's a big MMA community out there, so I'd like for them to be able to hear where that conversation goes, and also talk a little bit in general terms about, the many, many messages I get from people outside of MMA that have drawn some positive inspiration from kind of our approach to our philosophy of training, which is really our philosophy of life, and kind of how that molded and evolved over the years and to where we are today. So that's kind of how I see the night going.
And with 2 shows and the fact that we'll be on stage with you, interviewing you for over 2 hours, and the fact that there will be a chance for fans to get in their fan Q&A and their questions, I think we're going to cover all that and a lot more. And honestly, it's a huge honor for us, and we absolutely can't wait to do it. Win or learn. It is an evening with John Kavanagh. For those who don't know, April 7th in Sydney at the Star Event Centre and April 18th in Melbourne at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. Get your tickets because they're available now, and there are meet and greet ones available as well. So you don't just have to listen to us and John talk. You can meet the man and talk to him yourself. And we are doing a competition at the moment where you can win free double passes to see John live. All you got to do is jump on iTunes, leave a review for Submission Radio. The link is in the description below, and email us at info@submissionradio.com to confirm your username and whether you want to attend Melbourne or Sydney. We will choose the best reviews, and you'll be on your way for free to attend this event. It's going to be a lot of fun. We can't wait, and we're giving away a free double pass every single week until the tour. So get onto it. Again, John, it's been a long time since you've been on the show. We had a long chance to miss you. We are very grateful and happy that you were able to come back on the show, and we'll be seeing you in April, so we look forward to that, and thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
All right, take it easy, dog.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest has been a long-time friend of the program. He describes himself as a journalist exploring the intersection of politics and sports, and his phenomenal work can be found on Bloody Elbow, Sports on Earth, and Open Democracy Russia, and Beyond, among others. He has also been nominated for MMA's Journalist of the Year at the World MMA Awards, which is extremely exciting. It is a pleasure to welcome back Karim Zidan to Submission Radio. Karim, how's things?
You know, I'm really liking that we're making this a regular thing now. It's February, and I've already made the 2nd appearance on the show. I'm liking this. I'm liking this very much. I'm glad to be back on, guys. It's good to talk to you again.
Be careful what you wish for, Karim, because we'll get you on every single show and follow you around all day long in Canada. We'll find out where you live, and we'll just record you all day long because we love it so much. But let's talk about this. This is a huge deal. You've been nominated for Journalist of the Year. A lot of people are very, very happy to see this happen. It's a huge achievement to be named as one of the best of the year. How are you feeling? Are you anxiously awaiting the result in a few days? And more importantly, talk to us about the hot outfit you're planning to wear on the day.
I just picked out the suits I'm getting for the awards, actually, and it's all here right in front of me, packed away and ready for the trip. I head out tomorrow, being Wednesday. So it's going to be interesting, I think. I'm humbled because some of the people that are on there, I mean, I can name a Ben Folks, for instance, who I've been reading well before I even started writing about the fights. And Sean Al-Shadi, I'll tell you, Sean Al-Shadi's long forms inspired me to get into long forms. So when people tell me they love my long forms, you've got Sean Al-Shadi to thank, because I read one of his and I was like, that's exactly what I want to be doing. So it's a pleasure and an honor, honestly, and it's a surprise, and I'm sure me saying it's a surprise is not going to be a shock to many people. I cover a very particular aspect of the sport, as well as covering other sports as well. So the idea of being nominated alongside people who specialize in the beats and are so good at what they do is humbling. And I think it's a good sign for people who choose to stay away from these topics, these more controversial topics that I pick along these lines, to say, you know what, step outside that comfort zone and maybe something good comes from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's awesome to see you up there, and it's almost like an award in itself, being named as one of the best of the year. It's like you guys are narrowed down to a category, and that category is pretty much the category with you. Just so many great guys in that category. But I mean, I know you might have seen what happened at the Oscars. Are you at all worried the wrong name gets read out, and then they go, "No, Karim, it's you." You won the award. You know, there might be a mix-up in the cards. Are you prepared for this? Because if it happens at the Oscars, I'm going to tell you, Karim, it can happen anywhere.
Oh, you know what's worse than it happening just at the MMA Awards? The fact that with MMA fans being the way they are, it's going to be announced as pro wrestling and fake and planned the whole way through. So that will be the story at the end of this, no matter who actually wins, whether it's me or someone else. That's going to be the story, that this was a fake setup to get this going. I don't know. I didn't actually end up watching the Oscars, but you couldn't really hide from that story, really. I didn't watch the Oscars, but that story was everywhere, and I thought it was was an interesting way for Moonlight to win. I mean, it's a way to get people talking at the end of the day. Let's just get to the event and see what happens.
Bring a steel chair just in case and really complete the look. And just on a side note, we saw a massive outpour of support to have you on the Joe Rogan podcast when Joe was talking about some of the topics that you're obviously known for covering. Just curious if you heard anything from Joe, and when can we eagerly expect this to happen anytime soon?
I haven't heard from Joe, actually, but I'm sure that article, that tweet that I put out when I messaged him, publicly saying that I'd be happy to come on the show after I was informed that he had put up one of my articles and discussed the Kadyrov thing with Ian McCall on the Fight Companion. I just messaged him publicly saying I'd be more than happy to come on the Joe Rogan Experience, and the way I put it was to discuss how sports are being weaponized by these dictators. That's exactly the wording I stand by. And the support was remarkable, actually. I couldn't believe how many times I got retweeted, the amount of people that messaged him. So I'm hoping he noticed it, and at some point I'll get a chance to discuss these more controversial topics with someone like Joe Rogan on such a platform. I think he'll stimulate me and push me to an extent, and it will be interesting because he himself has said it on multiple shows that he's no expert on Russia, and I can expect the same thing from the vast majority of his listeners. And I feel I've done enough explainers in the past and gone on enough shows, or I've had to start from the very beginning, that at this point I've got that part mastered.
Well, if you people want to see Karim on the program with Joe Rogan, I mean, that would be, I would listen to that maybe twice, 3 times, listen to it while having a shower. I think it would be a fascinating program. Everybody needs to get behind it and keep tweeting away. Joe will hear us and we will get Karim on the program. That's going to be our achievement for the year.
I'll even make the special trip out to California. So he says I'm on the show. I get my plane ticket that same day. That's how it goes. That's how much I'm interested in being on that show and speaking to that audience.
I love it. We've been trying to get you down for the Australian Open for a few years now, but the Joe Rogan podcast and Karim's all of a sudden out of Canada. We see how it is.
All right, you know what? That's a little closer. A little closer and a little cheaper, okay?
Listen, potato. All right, distance. Yeah, all right. Well, look, you're our go-to guy. I mean, look, the bottom line is everybody needs to tweet this, tweet Joe Rogan, and I don't want to say harass, but all right, let's say harass him until Karim gets on the program, because it'd be a great thing. But look, you're our go-to guy, obviously, when it comes to anything related to MMA in Europe's Eastern Bloc. So is it safe to assume that of all the fights at UFC 209, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson is the one that you're most looking forward to, Karim?
I am, and I honestly do not know. It is definitely the fight I'm looking forward to the most by a long shot. And I really don't know if I can attribute this to my bias or the fact that this is a truly exceptional fight in an era where the UFC is simply looking for that home run hits entertainment fight. To see exactly what we all love in the sport come to be truly the two top fighters in that division, setting aside, of course, Conor McGregor in that scenario, just to watch those two fighters come to be. I'll tell you what, guys, I watched the countdown show, particularly that clip for that fight, and this must be the first countdown show I've watched in, honestly, maybe 5 years, honestly. And I watched that clip and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even think I'd be more pumped for the fight, but I actually am. This is an exceptional thing, as I say. Most people would be like, well, we're psyched for fights every week, but I'm not anymore, honestly. It's come to the point where when I don't do fight night event coverage, I'm DVRing and watching at a different point. Skipping through the ads, skipping through most of it. Sometimes it's on mute when I'm watching. It depends who's speaking. It's a whole different experience for me now. Watching fights and taking in the information. It gets too much of a... it takes over your life, and I guess I have to have other elements into it sometimes. But Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson, that's a special fight.
Well, we're only days away from the event, and unfortunately Khabib's father as well as his second cousin were both denied visas to enter the US. While this isn't exactly news, the interesting thing that you mentioned on Twitter is that you don't recall a time when Khabib's father has ever been in the States when Khabib has fought in the past. What do you think made him want to attend this fight?
Well, I think people didn't understand the whole story, and I guess when I put out that tweet, I come to assume a lot of times that people have been following the story along in my previous tweets, etc. Khabib's father has tried to attend events in the past, and as a matter of fact, he's been in the States before to corner Islam Makhachev. And he was supposed to be in the States at the time where Khabib withdrew from one of his fights. And I cannot remember which one it was, but it was in that horrible long stretch of injuries he had. So his father has been to the States multiple times, but as of right, his visa had expired or was canceled recently. The details there are a little murky, and they were trying to get a new one done for UFC 209 so he could be in attendance, and that has not happened. So that's where the news came out. The Russian media decided to report that Abdulmanap, and this was actually him. They spoke to him personally, and he said, "I cannot go. I do not have a visa. I was just denied." Like this is new information in that regard, and it's an odd situation because yes, I'm certain Khabib would love to have his father in his corner, but at the same time, he's never been there in a UFC fight, and Khabib is dead set and focused anyway on winning, and I don't think it's going to impact him in any way whatsoever. The thing is, a lot of people were tweeting at me saying, "Oh my God, is this going to be the deciding factor? Is this a disadvantage?" And people were discussing it like it was a true talking point, but I don't think it is. I honestly don't think it is. Abdulmanap is going to do exactly what he does at every Khabib fight in the UFC, and that's he's going to sit at home in Dagestan and he's going to watch the fight. And he's going to call his son and congratulate him afterwards if he wins this time as he has in the past. It's not one of those situations where Khabib is going to be impacted, but I found it very interesting the traction that not only the article got, but the tweet got as well. I honestly thought people would be more interested in the fact that Abdulmanap said that Khabib was going to retire within the next couple of years. So by 2018, the end of 2018, when he's 30, Abdulmanap expects him to retire. Yet that story didn't gain the same traction as Abdulmanap not coming into the United States for this fight. So it's really, sometimes I can't understand MMA fans.
Yeah, it's crazy because when we were Googling things, like obviously your story and the other subsequent stories of that visa came up a lot quicker, and you really had to Google like Khabib Nurmagomedov retire for that story to pop up, which is crazy because obviously it's so much of a bigger story. But all right, let's talk about that. Obviously, you know, Abdulmanap has stated that he believes Khabib should retire in 2 years by the time he's 30 in order to be a healthy thinking person and to develop other fighters. Obviously, you know, father's advice isn't always taken. Remember when Lyoto Machida's dad said that Lyoto should retire if he's lost a Shogun. But what do you make of this sentiment, and do you think Khabib would actually retire so soon?
I think it's definitely an option. And it's an option for multiple reasons. First of all, he takes his father's word very seriously. I got a lot of people saying, who the hell listens to their parents at this age? Isn't Khabib old enough to make his own decisions? Well, of course he's old enough to make his own decisions, but there's a certain level of respect that's given to the father in Dagestan and other very patriarchal societies, and that sort of respect is not broken. And this is a man who's started training Khabib in wrestling at the age of 6, has been with him, made him wrestle a bear at age 9, and they have a very unique bond, mentor. As much as it is a father and son relationship, it's a mentor-mentee relationship as well. So yes, he would definitely take his advice heavily into consideration, and that's the key factor. It's not that he would just simply listen to him like someone without a brain, but it's that his opinion would weigh far heavier than the vast majority of other opinions. So if Khabib Nurmagomedov, and the key to that retirement quote was that Abdulmanap had a plan. His plan was that Khabib would beat Ferguson, win the interim title, beat Conor McGregor, and then defend the actual undisputed title a couple of times and retire. So that's what he wants to do. By the end of 2018, he turns 30, retires on top, and moves on to different things in Russia. Now, those different things are quite interesting. He could, for instance, be an ambassador for the sport in Russia. He could take on political roles. I've written countless articles on how Russian athletes are led into politics after their careers, especially the successful ones and the ones who are considered role models to their people. I've got actually an article coming up on Thursday, a long form on Khabib, that details exactly how big of a star he is to certain communities and how he transcends the ethnic divide. So for people who really want to understand how important he is to certain people and to certain areas, to Muslims in particular, and the youth who are inspired by him in Russia, and those are millions and millions of people, I think you should read that article when it comes up on Thursday. So there's a lot to Khabib when it comes to his post-fighting career. I don't think he's going to have to worry about money at all. if he considers himself done and that he's achieved everything he wants to achieve, he'll retire on top and enjoy the Russian elite status the way Fedor does. He'll take, for instance, Khabib in retirement could take over Fedor Emelianenko's role as head of the Russian MMA union, for instance. Wow. If Fedor chooses to retire at some point, or for the position to be passed on, I mean, it's voted upon every 4 years, so Fedor has it till 2020. And I mean, this is just one of many, many ideas, right? He could take an advisory role in the Ministry of Sports in Russia, for instance, and work in the Kremlin. He could specifically work in Dagestan as an advisor for the Ministry of Sports. He could even become the Minister of Sports in Dagestan. It's endless opportunities. And this is probably exactly why his father said the quote, he wants him to be a healthy thinking human being, because he's got plans for his son. And it's important that role models like Khabib exist in Dagestan, an area where, I mean, if you follow my timeline, at least on Twitter, you'll see me retweeting a lot of times militant attacks that are happening there, and when I retweet these things, I'm trying to show how turbulent an area it is when it's still producing such splendid fighters. Now, these fighters are on a very fine line between enjoying success and managing to find a career out of poverty, rags to riches sort of stories, and others who find everything hopeless and move on to insurgency. So Khabib could be a very pivotal character in sort of securing a whole new generation of Dagestani and Caucasus youth and telling them that sports is better than these horrible alternatives.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've done an amazing job of putting that into perspective. One thing that I'm wondering, though, is that Khabib's dad's plans all hinge on the assumption that he beats Tony Ferguson. What do you think happens if he doesn't? Do you think that makes him stick around longer to achieve his goal of being the greatest, or do you think maybe that what if hypothetically he was to suffer some kind of brutal knockout or damaging loss? Do you think that would incline him to maybe retire a little bit earlier?
That's a really interesting one. I can't pretend I can get into the psyche of Khabib at all when it comes to something like this. That's the issue. I have to just assume that it will be one of the two directions, really. It depends again on how bad the loss was. I mean, I can imagine him, if he loses a close decision to this Ferguson fight is extremely close, really extremely close. You can imagine something of the sorts possibly happening. And if he loses a razor-thin decision, then I can imagine there being a fire to come back and to really push until he's able to get where he wants, and then that timeline sort of changes a little bit. So I think Khabib, like you mentioned, Khabib's dad's plan is basically relies on the fact that he is going to beat Tony Ferguson come Saturday night, which is not necessarily a given at all. So Khabib could prolong his career a little longer. And again, if he does suffer a brutal knockout, I can imagine his father would still push for retirement at around the same age, possibly, but he'd probably want him to avenge his loss. Fans would expect that of him in Russia too, because he carries quite a weight on his shoulders. It's a difficult one. I can understand when he said a few days ago that he doesn't like the idea that he could become a big star, because he knows what this means and what it means to a lot of people. So if he loses, he's going to be expected to come back and to win and to represent Russia. There's a whole country, and especially the youth in the Caucasus, this is a minority that suffers a lot of racism in Russia. For them to know that the first UFC champion is not just a Russian, it's not just a Russian UFC champion, but a Dagestani, one of their own, who wears the papacha on his head, who represents his country, who says he's a pious, religious Muslim who won't fight in Ramadan. One of them, basically, truly one of them. He's one of those stories. So I can imagine that drive is going to go on until he wins that title. I think there's too much on the line for him to change that. So if he loses once, he's going to go for it again, unless something horrific and a really horrible injury or a bad knockout happens, and then obviously that changes things a little bit.
You mentioned him mentioning that he's sort of worried about the fame that comes with, being such a successful fighter, and I find that interesting. And you sort of touched on it. I wanted to get your thoughts, because he's kind of like this endearing contradiction where on one hand he's trying really hard to promote himself and call out Conor McGregor in really the loudest way possible so that he can achieve this goal of becoming a champion. And obviously UFC 205, that post-fight speech was a great example of that. But on the other hand, like you mentioned, he fears that attention that comes with being a champion. He kind of prefers when people don't really know who he is. It's a very fascinating, contrasting mindset. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is his mindset as opposed to so many other fighters?
Well, I think it's because he comes from such a modest background, and he's a pious, religious person who knows he can't really enjoy these ostentatious things that come with being and just like luxurious living that comes with being a star and then the celebrity that comes with it. I mean, he's really not going to partake in that, and he's going to be expected to a certain extent in the United States. So I can understand him worrying about that sort of thing. For instance, I bet when he travels to San Jose and wherever he is in California for camps and stuff, I bet he enjoys that less people know him there than when he walks down the street in Dagestan. At least for a little bit, because in Dagestan he's getting no rest. Everybody knows him. He is truly one of the most well-known people in all of Dagestan and one of the most well-known athletes in all of Russia. It's inevitable. So I know when he's at home, there's no rest, there's no peace. People want to see him. He's always invited to do seminars and to go meet people. It's endless. So I can understand him worrying that if he gets the title, it's going to double and it's going to be there in the United States. So yeah, and probably he just wants to fight and move on. He's probably not that interested in that form of stardom. At least that's what I sense from what he said when he said that statement. I could be completely wrong there. But all I can tell you for a fact is that there's already a ton of pressure on him back home. You can imagine how that's going to multiply if he wins the title. I'd be worried too.
Well, you reported on the UFC reaching an agreement with Match TV for a new TV deal in Australia and in Russia, and the negotiations that took place. Obviously, it's a huge market there for MMA. I mean, you just mentioned how much pressure there is on Khabib, but what do you think a win over Ferguson would do for him over in Russia? Obviously, he's already a massive star, but do you think this really gets things going in Russia in terms of MMA growing as a sport and UFC becoming more popular?
I really like that you tied those two stories together there about Khabib and the Match TV deal. And here's why. UFC did get a better deal, but they had already given their rights to Telesport, the third party. And the third party had paid them what they had paid them. So the UFC was already satisfied. It was down to Telesport and Match TV to reach to reach an agreement, and they did it just that later on. I don't know who's truly profiting well from this or not, but this is a one-year deal, and they reached this agreement now based on the fact that Russians are demanding that they be able to watch Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. This is just an essential thing, and Russians will be able to stream it live and do all sorts of different things, but it's important that this fight air because this is one of the only ones that they're interested in. This is the idea that the UFC's first Russian champion could be given his belt in that octagon and it not be broadcast on a single television in Russia is a little odd to think about. So that deal hinged on the fact that Khabib was fighting this Saturday and they reached an agreement. And now that I come back to the thing that I said about connecting these two stories is that I think everything about the UFC's attempt to go to Russia rests on Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I honestly do. Because the UFC's old deal was about $500,000 a year for the Match TV, right? And
insane.
No, that's awful. That's abysmal, and they're not making too much better right now. There's a limit to what they can do in the Russian market. There's multiple limitations. There's obstacles. I'll be doing a series of articles just detailing the obstacles in the UFC's path to truly conquering that market or in any way surviving within the market other than doing the occasional novelty show where they'll be losing on every event, which doesn't seem like WME IMG's strategy. Well, they're not going to have Khabib there because he's going to be fighting on pay-per-view if he fights McGregor or if he fights whoever, if he becomes champion. So how are they going to really do this? It works for the Match TV deal because at least they're going to be broadcasting. But in terms of the UFC in Russia, I don't know. If Khabib chooses to retire, I think they fall back on those plans. There's no other UFC Russian fighter that's really like that outstanding that he stands out above the Russian fighters already fighting in Russia. What makes it so special then? It doesn't. Khabib Nurmagomedov is special because the past, I don't know, how long has it been? 5 years or so of his career he spent in the UFC. That's a long time away from Russia, where Russian fans wanted to see him fight. So that's a special character for them. There's not many like that. There's not many Fedors and Khabibs, and those are the people where deals like this rest on. The Russian market is just not a fantastic market. I'm amazed Dana was pushing it so hard, which is why I come back to the points that there were very interesting correlations between like the Trump administration and Dana White's ties and the UFC's ties to Trump's White House, and them going to Russia and meeting with top Kremlin officials, being Ari Emanuel and Dana White meeting with the deputy prime minister of the Russian Federation and discussing a potential UFC event. I mean, when we're talking about something that's really not that profitable, I always come back and I wonder, why would they go through such an effort, and how did they end up meeting such a high-up official in Putin's inner circle?
And, I mean, there's a lot that you covered there, but one thing I wanted to mention is it's just crazy how for so long we thought the Fedor Emelianenko was sort of going to be a key for UFC in Russia, and obviously that never happened, and it's just, before you know it, it's a completely different guy here in Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, and it's interesting how that, I guess, the success of the UFC in Russia hinges on him. And Fedor himself was obviously on the EMEA recently and questioned whether UFC would want Khabib as their UFC champion. What do you think? I mean, is there anything that has led you to believe that they'd lean in favor of or against him being champion, other than the fact that they could probably draw more money with Conor McGregor, and the fact that he says he might retire soon, or sorry, his dad has thrown that out there? Would that change the way they utilize him and promote him as a star?
Well, I bet it wouldn't make them happy, the idea that they'd have a champion come in, knock off one of their top stars, and then choose to retire a couple of years later. Yeah. Not to mention that Khabib will never be able to get the rub that Conor McGregor has, just get a rub off Conor McGregor to that extent, off a win, that he'd become the same equivalent star. It just doesn't work that way. And so it's a lose-lose situation almost for the UFC if you're contemplating Khabib versus McGregor. Just business sense would be rooting for McGregor to beat Khabib. But and also the fact that he's a Russian star and he's a Muslim star from a controversial and a difficult, troubling region that is very misunderstood by people. They might contemplate the sort of publicity they get. Not that I'm questioning at all, or that I have any personal issues with Khabib being champion. I think it would be fantastic, that sort of diversity in the UFC, and to prove that they can have those sort of champions. But I wonder if the business themselves, the WME-IMG, is that happy with the idea. It's a difficult question, and I don't know where his limitations are in terms of how much the UFC can profit off him. Like I said, you can't do that much with him in Russia. Even if you do throw one event in Russia with Khabib, it doesn't work on pay-per-view. So say you try and profit at the gate in Russian rubles, in a collapsed or a collapsing economy, in a recession right now, at least a troubled economy in Russia, you're not going to profit. So you try and put him on pay-per-view. And has he really, really connected with the American audience that many people will buy his fights unless it's with, say, McGregor? I don't know. So I think their gains with him are limited. So I don't know why Fedor actually thought to mention this. I think the point he was trying to make was that he can't understand why Khabib still hasn't gotten a title, or it's taken this long for Khabib to get his title shots, or to get this far. Yeah. Basically, I don't know if he meant it too seriously, as in they really want to keep him away from the title. But it leads to an interesting perspective if he did mean it like that. I wonder if he himself understands the racial issues and the ethnic divide that exists in Russia between Slavic and traditionally ethnic Russians like Fedor and those Russian Orthodox Russians like that, and the people from the North Caucasus, and there's an issue there. So people in Russia generally, while they're happy that people from the North Caucasus will win most of the medals in wrestling and will become possibly champions in the UFC, etc., they all win this for Russia. At the end of the day, in the UFC, whoever is in the commentary booth is likely going to say a Russian UFC champion, not a Dagestani UFC champion, which is why most Russians allow this sort of acceptance of athletes that aren't ethnic Russians. But that doesn't mean that applies to all regular citizens. So I wonder if Fedor is speaking from his own personal experience, not him personally, how he feels about Khabib, but just knowing how Russia is and the struggles that Khabib will already face in his country and beyond, being from Dagestan, being Muslim, being a minority himself, and it's very difficult. I think it'll be phenomenal for him to be champion. I think it's great. I just know that this comes with a lot of different publicity and different attitudes from people. I mean, think about it, guys. Look at the world we're in right now. Look at the Islamophobia that's going around pretty much everywhere. Not to get too political, but that's the climate right now. We've got an administration in the United States that's spreading that sort of hate, and it's a difficult time for everyone. So you can imagine Khabib becoming a champion in an organization that has great ties to the Trump administration. It's going to be an interesting one. If anything, it's quite ironic, and I'm all for it.
It's going to be very interesting. And I think partly that's why your article about the visas was so popular. I think it's just a big issue right now in America with what's going on, and people aren't not being able to make it into the country from certain places, which is really sad. Now, before we let you go, Karim, we just want to quickly, we know you're all about the narrative. We know that you write great stories, but I mean, this is a big, juicy, exciting fight. No, by the way, no one can really predict this one. No one really knows what's going to happen, but we have to go off our gut feelings. I mean, we've watched the sport for such a long time. Something inside of us is saying one name or the other. So when you listen to that little Karim inside of you, what's he saying? Is he saying it's going to be Khabib or Tony this weekend?
I'm saying it's going to be Khabib. I really do think it's going to be Khabib. I don't know how he's going to pull it off, which is what's incredible about this. I'm watching the countdown. I'm watching everything that you look at Ferguson, you look at the way he's approached this, and you listen to his interviews and how focused he is, and you just look at his resume over his past few fights and just how much he's developed. And I think, well, this is a great fight. Can Khabib handle that for 5 rounds? I don't know. Is he going to finish him? Is he going to submit him? Is he going to TKO him? I don't know. But there's a little voice inside me that says, this means so much to Khabib. I can't see. I think there's been 2 other fights where I thought Khabib has a chance to lose. Even Michael Johnson, I'm like, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is it for him. Like, this is finally going to be the first loss. But it didn't happen then. I don't think it's going to happen now. If anything, I might pick against him in a McGregor fight. Might do that. I'd pick against him potentially in a McGregor fight. And even that I'd have to analyze a little bit more. But I think I feel a little more confident in a Ferguson fight. But I wouldn't be ashamed at all of being wrong and for Ferguson to win. May the best man win, truly. This is one of those examples where you really want to see the better of the 2 fighters win and propel himself to that next stage.
Well, there you guys go. A big week for MMA fans and a big week for Karim. Make sure to support him at the World MMA Awards. Again, a huge deal, him being nominated, and very excited to see you possibly get the award. Don't forget to mention us in your speech, Karim. I know it's difficult, but leave the parents and the girlfriend out and just mention Dennis and Casper from Submission Radio. You know, there's a long relationship there. And make sure to follow him on Twitter at Zidan Sports. Get in there before he becomes the new hot thing and no longer comes on a program anymore. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you have to come on a program at least once a month, Karim. We love you that much. Enjoy the fights. All the best, and best of luck this week. We'll be watching. Guys, again, make sure to check out Karim's work. It is outstanding. Always fantastic pieces. And you mentioned a piece coming out on Thursday, Karim.
Yes, there is going to be a piece on Bloody Elbow at around noon Eastern time called The Eagle, the Bear, and the Fighter. And I'd like you all to check it out. It's going to be my second attempt at a long form on Khabib and his family. And I think the first one, the Dagestan Dynasty piece on his father, his father's background, I think that still remains one of my most popular articles in terms of people coming back to me and giving me feedback on that story. Wow. It was recently even refeatured on Reddit. So I hope this one can stand out. I know the expectations will be high based on the first one, but it's a very different story. This is a very different attempt at a story about discussing a lot of what we talked about actually on the show today, guys. A lot about his ethnicity and his background and how just the dichotomy of his identity in Russia and how it will play out as he becomes potentially a UFC champion. I'm quite proud of it. I look forward to hearing from people about it.
Yeah, and I mean, you say that you feel pressure to top yourself, but we know you're a man who has that kind of drive, who will push himself, and we also really appreciate the fact that you've covered a lot of what is in that article here today and given the listeners, I guess, a big preview. And everybody always loves when you come on the program. Don't forget to tweet Joe Rogan nonstop 24/7, guys, to get Karim on the Joe Rogan Experience. And Karim, thank you so much. We always love having you on the program.
Thanks, guys, and thank you so much for the support. It really does mean like the world to me.
Karim Zidan, ladies and gentlemen, a big week for him. Hope he wins that award, and a great relation between us and Karim, Cass. I mean, we've been around for a couple of years now, and he's always been really, really great to us. We've been big fans of his long before he started coming on the program, and every time he does, it's always a very honest, very eye-opening conversation that we love having. So he's always got a home here at Submission Radio, even when he does become a huge star and leaves us for Joe Rogan.
Yeah, no doubt. He'll be like Conor McGregor, the iPay-per-view. He'll be entering interviews in Rolls Royces or Bentleys, and he'll be wearing sunglasses indoors. But no, a lot of love for Karim, and it's interesting because he thanks us for the support, but he's actually been one of our biggest supporters for a number of years, all the way back when we first started, and he was the main guy doing articles for us on Bloody Elbow. So the relationship is and always will be strong, and hopefully, I know you're a big tennis fan, and so is he. So hopefully one day we do end up watching the Australian Open together.
Yeah, that's right. Who knows? We can set up some kind of Submission Radio interview with Serena Williams, ask her about Conor McGregor for half an hour, get her credentials taken off us and banned from the Australian Open for the rest of time. I can't wait. Maybe next year. But hey, before we wrap this party up, I mean, it's a huge card. UFC 209, we're not lying. We've seen fans really excited. The beginning of the year, a little bit quiet, fans sort of off doing their own thing, checking stuff out, but you're really feeling like everyone's sort of come back around and really excited for this card. So before we finish up the show, me and Casper are just going to quickly go through the big three fights on the main card, give our predictions, and I guess to sort of talk about who we think is going to come out on top. The first fight I want to get into, Cass, is the Mark Hunt-Alistair Overeem fight. It's a rematch, but to me, it's one of those fights where the first one almost doesn't really matter because both fighters are just so different in this time and age. When you're looking at this fight, considering what you know, who do you think's going to win it this weekend?
Yeah, one of the things that stands out to me from that first fight in Dream of 2008 was the difference in Alistair Overeem's body compared to now, and just the strength of Mark Hunt. Even though he lost, there was that one moment where they entered the clinch and Mark Hunt just ragdolled Alistair Overeem like nobody else did at that point. I mean, we remember against Brock Lesnar, UFC 141, Lesnar was a massive guy, a strong guy, who ragdolled Mark Hunt. And when Lesnar went in for that takedown, Overeem just shrugged him off like nothing. But Mark Hunt in Dream just threw Alistair Overeem to the ground, and of course it ended up being to his detriment because he got submitted. But these guys are very different. I think that Alistair Overeem, he certainly has the tools to win. I think if he's going to do it, he needs to use the clinch and be a little bit more smarter. Maybe use those uber knees, maybe tire out Mark Hunt. I mean, the rumors are that Mark Hunt's been training very hard for this one, but not to say that cardio has really been an issue, but I think that if he throws a lot of shots to the body, I mean, everybody knows Mark Hunt's amazing chin, but you can't really have a chin when it comes to your liver. And I think that a liver shot is probably a good way to put Mark Hunt down, or at least slow him down in the later rounds. Unfortunately, though, Alistair Overeem's chin, it's not that great, and he's been knocked out countless times, and I think with Mark Hunt having 15 minutes to catch him, I think at some point Mark Hunt may be able to put in the pressure. We've seen even in the Roy Nelson fight where Alistair Overeem was doing tremendously and winning that fight handily, and then as soon as Roy Nelson really put the pressure on him, he managed to tag and I think even rock Alistair Overeem towards the end. And I think if Mark Hunt can do that, and if Alistair Overeem can't stay uber calm all the way to the end, I think there's a good chance Mark Hunt catches him, and I think chances are that's what we're going to see. So I'm predicting Mark Hunt. I can't predict a round, but I think it's going to be a knockout for Mark Hunt at some point.
Yeah, and for me with this fight, I can see Overeem, like you mentioned, sort of using his footwork, moving around, dragging this fight out, and maybe like winning with some kind of decision in the third round. Not finishing Mark Hunt, but getting close to it in certain parts. Mark Hunt just sort of hanging in through that. But to me, I mean, look, we've been speaking to Mark Hunt's manager, Zen, who said Mark is really focused on this fight. He's been training really, really hard. He hasn't really been doing many interviews. He's just been taking this very, very seriously. I think Mark Hunt realizes that he has to have a good showing this weekend, considering everything that's going on with his career. He really sort of needs to show people where he's at. And the big thing for me has always been what kind of Mark Hunt we'll see. And if it is a motivated Mark Hunt and he is in shape, which has been, for me, well, not the biggest gripe, but just the fact that he does get severely out of shape in between camps and doesn't really have the genetics or the body to get back in that peak shape and time. I think if he is conditioned well, if he is taking this seriously, he shouldn't have a problem in stopping Overeem in the first couple of rounds. I think I still don't, if it goes to the third round, I don't know if he'll have the conditioning to finish it. But the thing about Mark Hunt, the big difference to me between Mark Hunt and Roy Nelson has always been the fact that Mark Hunt's footwork is just outstanding and a lot better than Roy Nelson's, and he's able to set up a lot better strikes, better combinations, and he actually moves really quick. The big downfall for Overeem for me is arrogance. I don't think he'll be arrogant going into this fight. We've seen him arrogant against a number of fighters before, but he does have a win over Mark Hunt previously. So I wonder how that's going to play into this game mentally. I know Jackson Winklejohns has done a great job of sort of settling him down and making him more cautious and really using strategy. But if he does come into this fight a bit cocky and thinking, oh, I've beaten him once, I'll beat him again, and Brock Lesnar beat him, blah, 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 and I beat Brock Lesnar, I think that's going to be a huge downfall for Overeem. He needs to be really realistic here and understand that Mark Hunt is super dangerous in this fight. So I can see a way where Overeem pulls us out with the decision and sort of drags this fight out and uses strategy, uses movement. But to me, I see this as a fight that, like yourself, Casper, where Mark Hunt wins in the first couple of rounds. To me, in the first couple of rounds, I think he'll be able to stop him with the TKO or KO.
All right, let's talk about the next fight. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus who's your I'll go again. Oh my. Yeah, either way, it's a can't miss fight. Let's talk about this next fight. We're talking about can't miss fights. Let's talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. I'm proud because this is a fight that we've been banging on about for a long time before it was even booked, saying, I mean, even then we were salivating, saying, oh my God, could you imagine this fight? Like, Tony Ferguson would be the guy where even if Khabib took him down to the ground, it would still be an exciting fight and he'd fight back. And this is, I think, not long after the Danny Castillo fight that Tony Ferguson won. So when you're looking at this matchup, and one of the stories here in on itself is that it's such a difficult fight to predict. Most people are not even predicting it; they just want to see a really good fight. But what are you leaning towards? What are you expecting the fight to happen in this fight, Dennis?
You know, to me, there's a couple of things that may happen in this fight. The first one is if Tony really is sort of happy to get to the ground with Khabib and is in the mindset where he does believe if Khabib ends up in his guard, he can actually throw up a submission and stop him. I actually think that's going to be a detriment to him. I see a situation where Khabib's in his guard, and as good as Tony is, I just think Khabib is so good that he gets out of that danger zone and just ends up in a dominant position and possibly being even more of a threat than Tony thinks he is. So to me, if it does end up in that position, I do see Khabib beating Tony. If Tony is looking at this thing realistically and realizing that, hey, if I can sort of keep it on the feet, use my wrestling takedown ability to stop it from going to the ground and sort of stay at that range where I can take, just like what he did with RDA, hit him with good shots, good long shots, keep him on the outside and really take advantage of the fact that Khabib's striking isn't, where Tony's is. I can see Tony beating him in that scenario. So to me, because Tony has such a well-rounded game, if he has the smart game plan, if he really doesn't kind of go into this fight willingly to end up on his back working from his guard and does keep this fight standing, I think he's going to win. And based on that and the fact that he has more tools in the belt, I'm going to give it to Ferguson. But again, if it ends up in that situation where Ferguson's like, all right, I'm going to go to my guard here and I'm dangerous from my guard, this is where I think Khabib can come in and really show him the difference in grappling ability. And it's not that Ferguson isn't an amazing grappler, but it's just the fact that Khabib is so damn good. It's just hard for me to imagine him being dangerous off his back against a guy like Khabib. So for me, it's Tony Ferguson because he's got more tools in the belt, but I wouldn't be surprised if Khabib somehow manages on the ground and Tony's too confident in his abilities, ends up in a bad position, possibly loses it. What about you, Cass? I mean, this is a crazy matchup.
Yeah, I mean, and that is one of the things that makes it such an exciting fight. We did see that in that Castillo fight where, I mean, I can confidently say that I think he won that fight even though it was a very close decision. Danny Castillo obviously protested it, but it's just not the kind of thing that you want happening in a fight like this where you're fighting for the belt. You don't want any question. You don't want split decisions. You don't really want to risk anything, which is kind of crazy because Tony Ferguson, that's one of the things that makes himself so exciting. He does risk so much. I think that for Tony, the key really is keep your back off the cage. I think he's going to have to sprawl, and he's going to have to sprawl really hard in the center of the octagon because Khabib, he can go in for a takedown, and even if he doesn't get it initially, he'll push the person over to the cage, and that's when he really goes to work. And I think Tony Ferguson is going to have, like you mentioned, he shouldn't entice the ground game. He shouldn't entertain it. I think he needs to have a no-nonsense attitude where if Khabib even goes for a takedown, he needs to sprawl in the middle of the octagon and not be anywhere near the cage and really keep distance and punish Khabib on the feet. That's his clear path to victory. And I think with Khabib, still remember when we were in New York, and really the big question was about his grappling versus Michael Johnson's, and do you think you can out-grapple him? Do you think, how do you think his wrestling compares? And Khabib was saying how, you guys kind of think I'm just a grappler, you guys think I'm just kind of a wrestler, but I can outstrike Michael Johnson. And we saw that when he did try and do that in the early goings of that fight, it really didn't work out for him. And I don't think that Khabib is going to be taking that risk in this fight. I don't, there's so much on the line, there's so much at stake. There's this Conor McGregor fight, there's him being champion, so many things that he wants. I don't think that he's going to really be testing himself on the feet against a guy like Tony Ferguson. And in saying that, I think that kind of, I don't want to say makes him one-dimensional because we've seen countless fighters, even today, even in today's MMA, be one-dimensional, still be really, really successful. But I think that if Tony Ferguson knows that the only way that Khabib can get him is with the wrestling, then I kind of give the advantage a little bit to Tony Ferguson, where he'll be ready for that sprawl, he'll be ready for that takedown defense. And I think that even we saw against Gleison Tibau, where Khabib didn't really have too much success once he couldn't get the takedown. And I think the other big question for me in this fight is what happens once and if it gets to rounds 4 and 5. I mean, we haven't seen Khabib's conditioning. Tony Ferguson's obviously very confident that he'll be able to exploit it. So, I mean, there's so many questions. I am leaning towards Tony Ferguson. I kind of feel like he has more paths to victory. He's by far the better striker, and he's pretty decent on the ground, whereas Khabib is a very, very amazing grappler. I just don't give him much of a chance on the feet. So I'm leaning Tony. I don't have an official prediction of how he gets it done, but I just have this feeling of Tony getting his hand raised.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating fight. And imagine it's one of those things where it just ends like in the first 10 seconds of the first round. You never know what's going to happen, and Khabib wins by knock. You just never know what's going to happen. But because Khabib's footwork is very, very flat, and when he moves forward, he's not really on his tippy toes. He's not as quick as Ferguson. I agree with you. When it does get to that sort of 4th and 5th round, there may be that opportunity where Ferguson is really able to use that footwork to keep distance and really start teeing off on Khabib from that distance. And he's got the long arms. He's got a lot of very decent strikes. He's very quick. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Because then the thing that you mentioned about the fence as well, I mean, if Khabib is able to get Ferguson up against the fence, then I'm like, whoa, what's going to happen there? Because Khabib's one of the only guys that I see in the UFC that when he goes for one technique, then he switches it to another technique based on the reaction that the person gives him. Like, you don't see that very often. A lot of time you see people up against the fence sort of going for the same double leg or the same throw or the same trip, but he'll actually gauge what you do as a defense to that first attack and then modify it so that he trips you when you try and go for that defense. So the guy's just so far ahead of what I understand about grappling, but then it's going to be an interesting matchup.
And that's something that's a huge component of judo and sambo, which obviously judo is a very big part of sambo. So the way he does it, the way he does these trips and foot sweeps, where somebody leans one way, he goes the other, they defend that, and he leans back the other way. It's like a sandpit of takedowns. And I mean, I'm leaning towards Tony because I'm trying to give a definitive prediction here, even though I'm not that confident. But make no mistake, if Khabib goes in there, takes him down, and either submits him or grinds him out for 5 rounds, that wouldn't surprise me either. This is just going to be an amazing fight.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. Let's talk about the main event, Wonderboy Thompson versus Tyron Woodley. I will say, before I ask for your prediction, that I didn't expect the first fight to play out the way that it did. I really thought Wonderboy was going to beat Woodley. I was very, very impressed with what Woodley was able to do. So I guess the big question for me to you, Cass, is where do you lean on this rematch? Are you sold on Woodley, or do you still think Wonderboy takes this?
Yeah, this is another fight that I'm having a lot of trouble picking because I've basically been flip-flopping on it all week. Obviously, you can really see either guy winning. When the first fight ends in a draw, it's hard to give a definitive answer. I'm kind of leaning towards Wonderboy in this one, though, just because in the first fight, I did get this feeling that there was so much pressure on him and there were so many outside factors, like the fact that he was fighting in New York, Chris Weidman was on the card, there was the fact that pretty much everybody was already picking him. And I don't know, I think even though you say that you don't really underestimate your opponent, I do think it does say something and does something for you when everybody is basically telling you that you're going to beat this guy, whether it's analysts, whether it's media, and just fans. So I think that in Wonderboy's case, the moment got to him a little bit, and he did things that were sort of out of character. Like, this is the best version of Woodley we saw fighting, but I think this is one of the, I don't want to say worse, but this wasn't the best version of Wonderboy that we saw fighting. And I think that if he can make a few adjustments, like I think it was in that round where Woodley really poured it on and did the first bit of damage. I think it was the first or second round. And I think that came from a lazy kick that Wonderboy threw. Woodley caught it and got taken down. I think those little adjustments, if Wonderboy can change those things, you saw that while Woodley did a lot of damage when he was successful and really capitalized, when he didn't have those opportunities to capitalize, it was Wonderboy for 3 rounds. So I do feel like Wonderboy can be a little bit more astute this time, a little bit more careful, and I guess more efficient with his offense, not throwing out lazy kicks. And I can definitely, I don't necessarily see him finishing Woodley, but I do think he's going to get the decision over Woodley.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you there as well. I can see Woodley going in there and sort of continuing that fight that they had at UFC 205 and sort of being successful, sort of grinding out some kind of decision. But I think that the fact that he's been in there with Woodley now and sort of knows his strength, knows what he feels like, has a better understanding of what he's up against, I think he's going to make those changes and we'll see a much better Stephen Thompson this weekend. I really do believe that. I'll be interesting to see what happens, though, because look, I've predicted against Woodley many times before. I'm very impressed with what he's been able to do in his last couple of fights. I'm wondering what kind of improvements Woodley's going to be able to make as well, the adjustments he's going to make after that fight that he had. And I'm just hoping that he's not too, I suppose, doesn't have too much of an ego about the first fight, because he did have some moments where he sort of was very dominant. I hope he's not going into this fight thinking, I was dominant in the first fight and I'll just be able to do what I did last time. I think if he's going in that way, it's not the right mindset. I'm hoping in between fights really worked on a few new little weapons in his game so he doesn't rely on the same attack as he did before. But again, I do think Woodley will lose this fight and we'll see a new champion in Wonderboy. But if Wonderboy loses, I mean, maybe the days of me picking against Woodley is over, depending. I don't know who'd be fighting next. If it's like Damian Maia, we might have to have another conversation later on. Yeah. But if it's, I don't know. It's crazy. But
I get the feeling that the UFC thinks Wonderboy is going to win as well. I know that Woodley obviously has taken issue with the way that he's been promoted, and he's obviously sided race, but I get this feeling that, again, in the first fight, a lot of people thought Wonderboy was going to win. I think the UFC were kind of bracing themselves that, all right, we're going to have a new champion here. We better start promoting him. And I kind of get this feeling that the UFC think that Wonderboy is going to win it as well.
Yeah, I get that feeling too. And also just getting the rematch. I mean, it's good that they gave the rematch. A lot of people get rematches, but I think if it was another fighter like Damian Maia, something like that, we wouldn't be seeing a rematch.
Well, Carlos Condit against Lawler. I mean, I think Carlos Condit won that fight, and he never got a rematch.
That's right, yeah. So the fact that they're throwing that rematch at him with everything else that's going on in the division, I think it's an indicator that they're sort of not hoping that he'd win, but wouldn't be against it if he comes out as champion.
I mean, look, I don't even think it's a preference. I just think that they believe that he has the skills to beat Woodley. And I think that if the UFC were betting, I think that they'd be betting that he's going to be winning. And they're like, well, we better start promoting him because he might be the new champion. But, I mean, Jesus Christ, these are some tough fights to pick. And that's what makes UFC 209 so exciting and so good. I mean, we had this streak at the start of the year where it wasn't really much action. I feel like it took a long time for MMA fans to sort of wake up and get back in the groove. We had these amazing events all throughout last year and especially towards the end. And I feel like we're back on track. UFC 209, finally, a massive, massive event that everybody's excited for, which is why we did this breakdown special, this preview special, and we're coming back in a few days, aren't we, Dennis? I know we've been doing the show on Wednesdays, but we're doing another show in a few days, right?
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's a huge event. Everybody's super excited. We're super excited. So we will be doing a post-fight show. It's not going to be the same as a normal show, but we will be breaking down the main fights from the card, giving you guys our opinion a lot sooner than a Wednesday or Thursday. So you'll be able to look forward to that. That's going to come out on Sunday in America, Monday in Australia. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sean Sheen's going to join us from Severe MMA, a friend of the program, and we're just going to get into it and sort of talk about our thoughts on the fights and I suppose what's next, because there's a lot of questions about what's next. We can sort of talk about what we think is going to be happening. So you guys can look forward to that. And then, of course, the normal show that comes out on Wednesdays in America and Thursdays in Australia will be out next week as well. So a couple of episodes of Submission Radio goodness. And as we wrap up, Cass, just a reminder to everybody listening that we are doing this great show with John Kavanagh in April. Win or Learn an Evening with John Kavanagh. Me and Casper will be hosting it. There'll also be a fan Q&A. So you guys we'll get an opportunity to get a question in there. It's going to be April 7th in Sydney at the Star Event Centre and April 18th in Melbourne at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. And if you guys haven't had an opportunity, definitely see if you can grab a ticket and come down. Come up, say hi. We'd love to chat to you. Love to get to know you. Love to meet you. And because of that, we are giving a bunch of double passes away on the program. We just gave a double pass away at the start of the show, and now we're giving away another one, aren't we, Cass?
Yeah, a lucky man by the name of Mark Fellows obviously got the first double pass, and we'll be giving one away every single week. So there are a lot to win, and all you got to do is jump on iTunes, leave a review for Submission Radio. We've got the link in the description below, and email us at info@submissionradio.com just so you can confirm username. And of course, you need to tell us whether you want to attend Melbourne or Sydney. We would absolutely hate to give away a double pass and then send you to the wrong one. And we'll look at the reviews. We always love reading them. We get off on reading them, and we'll pick the best ones and basically send you away to the show to see John Kavanagh. Of course, you'll be able to ask questions at the Q&A as well. So it'll be a fun night of action in April.
That's right. Giving away double passes to both Melbourne and Sydney. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, you guys can submit the iTunes review. We can see you at the show. I can't wait. John's a great guy. And a big thanks to him for being on the program today. Another big thanks to John Morgan, Robin Black, Karim Zidan, who's a great friend of the program. And a big thanks to you, Cass. It's been a lot of fun coming back and doing an episode. I know we didn't do one last week, but it's great to be back. I almost feel like we're making up for it a little bit because there'll be 2 episodes this week.
Yeah, UFC 209 preview, UFC 209 breakdown for all the people that miss Submission Radio, coming out on Sundays or Mondays, depending on whether you're in Australia or Monday. That one's for you. So I love it. A lot of action, a lot to talk about. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to all the guests. And, normally we'd be saying we'll see you next week, but we'll see you in a few days.